The rain lashed against the towering glass facade of St. Aurora Hospital, blurring the glittering tapestry of Manhattan's skyline into a silver-streaked canvas under the oppressive night. Sirens wailed in the distance, their mournful cries weaving into the city's relentless symphony. Inside the emergency maternity wing, the air crackled with a palpable tension. Nurses, their faces etched with concern, hurried through the gleaming corridors, the squeak of their rubber-soled shoes a frantic counterpoint to the hushed anxiety. Seasoned doctors, men and women who had witnessed countless miracles and tragedies, exchanged grim, knowing glances. They were bracing for a high-stakes cesarean section, a desperate race against time for 3 fragile premature infants clinging precariously to life. Ava Reynolds lay pale and still on the gurney, her breathing shallow and ragged. The monitors beside her flashed alarming warnings, a silent testament to her dwindling strength. Her fingers trembled as she clutched at the thin hospital blanket, seeking a phantom comfort. She had spent months in the shadows, a fugitive existence fueled by sheer will, pushing her body beyond its breaking point to protect the precious lives within her. Now, each contraction felt like a bone-shattering earthquake, threatening to tear her apart. "Stay with us, Ava," a nurse whispered, her voice a soothing balm as she squeezed Ava's hand, offering a lifeline of human connection before the gurney was wheeled toward the sterile expanse of the operating room. Downstairs, the hospital's glass doors exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Declan Ward, a storm of fury and desperation, strode in, rain plastering his expensive designer coat to his frame. His jaw was clenched so tight it seemed on the verge of shattering. He slammed a fistful of sodden papers onto the reception counter, the sound echoing through the tense lobby. "Where is she?" he snarled, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Ava Reynolds, my wife." The receptionist, startled, recoiled slightly. "Sir, she's not listed as your wife." Declan slammed both palms down on the counter, the force making the papers flutter. "I don't care what she listed. I want access to her room now." The hushed lobby erupted in whispers and gasps. Security guards, their faces grim, cautiously approached, attempting to defuse the volatile situation, but Declan shoved them aside with contemptuous ease. His eyes blazed, not with genuine concern, but with the inferno of wounded pride and a seething, ugly jealousy. A man of his stature, accustomed to absolute control, couldn't fathom the idea of losing it, especially not to another man, and certainly not to a wealthier, more powerful man. Upstairs, in a sterile, private surgical briefing room, Silas Hawthorne, his face pale and drawn, signed a stack of emergency consent forms, his hand shaking uncontrollably. His Mont-Blanc pen slipped, leaving a dark smudge on the pristine white paper. He wiped his trembling palm against his shirt, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The billionaire titan who commanded global boardrooms with unwavering authority couldn't steady himself long enough to decipher the risks outlined in stark black ink. All that consumed him was Ava, the woman who had carried their children alone, the woman he had failed to protect from the ghosts of her past. "Is she stable?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Barely," the doctor replied, his expression grave. "We need to deliver now." Silas ran a hand through his rain-dampened hair, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. "Do whatever you need. Save her and save the babies." As he stepped into the hallway, the elevator doors chimed open with a sharp, insistent ding. Declan Ward emerged, his eyes locking onto Silas's. It was a clash of titans, rage meeting ice, raw fury confronting implacable control. Silas moved first, blocking the corridor leading to the operating room, his body a solid wall. Declan smirked, lifting the papers he held, a weapon in his arsenal of entitlement. "Do you think you can keep me from her? She's mine. She always will be." Silas didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. "You'll never touch her again." Declan shoved past the guards, his expensive shoes pounding against the polished floor as he sprinted toward the double doors of the surgical wing. He grabbed the handle and froze, his face contorted in a mixture of shock and disbelief at what he saw inside. She wasn't alone, and the sight shattered every remaining illusion he had carefully constructed. Long before Ava Reynolds lay on a hospital gurney, fighting for her life and the lives of her unborn children, she had been the kind of woman who easily faded into the background, a quiet observer in a world obsessed with noise. Soft-spoken, steady-handed. She was a dedicated NICU nurse who cradled tiny newborns as if they were spun from glass. She was the one who stayed late when mothers wept, the one who whispered words of encouragement to families who had exhausted all hope. Her life had been small, quiet, almost invisible, but it was hers, and she took quiet pride in its unassuming purpose. Before Declan Ward stormed into her life, she couldn't have imagined the rarefied world he inhabited. Glittering rooftop bars where champagne flowed like water, impeccably tailored custom suits, and champagne towers that stretched towards the sky like crystalline mountains. They met at a charity gala, one of the many she worked part-time to make ends meet. She was refilling water pitchers, unnoticed, as he glided through the room, radiating an aura of celebrity. She accidentally spilled a glass of water near his table. Instead of scolding her, he laughed softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He said she had kind eyes, eyes that saw beyond the surface. He said she deserved better than scrubs and endless night shifts. He whispered all the things lonely women longed to hear, the promises that shimmered like fool's gold. But Ava was too innocent, too trusting to recognize that men like him built gilded cages out of compliments, trapping their prey with carefully crafted words. Their relationship moved at breakneck speed, a whirlwind romance that swept her off her feet. Within months, she had traded the sterile hallways of the NICU for a life in his meticulously curated Tribeca penthouse. The sleek marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic city views, the sprawling walk-in closets overflowing with designer clothes, everything appeared beautiful, perfect. Yet a nagging unease settled in her stomach, a premonition that something was terribly wrong. She tried to dismiss it, to convince herself that she was simply lucky, that ordinary girls didn't get chosen by men like Declan Ward. But the cracks in the facade soon widened, revealing the darkness beneath. He subtly dictated which friends were good influences, and which to sever ties with. He disapproved of her working, insisting that his wealth was more than sufficient. He wanted her confined to their penthouse, always reachable, utterly dependent on him. He held her waist possessively in public, showering her with affection for the cameras. But behind closed doors, his voice hardened, his words laced with a chilling condescension. If she dared to question his decisions, he accused her of being ungrateful, of not appreciating the life he had so generously provided. When she hesitated to start a family, wanting to first establish a solid foundation in their marriage, he mocked her dreams, dismissing them as naive and unrealistic. And when she finally did become pregnant, he forced her to visit a clinic she instinctively distrusted, whispering that children would jeopardize his carefully orchestrated future expansion plans, threatening to derail his ambitions. She never fully healed from that betrayal, the violation of her deepest instincts. When she finally left him, quietly, trembling with fear but resolute in her decision, wearing the first pair of shoes she could find, Declan retaliated with the ruthlessness of a cornered predator. He didn't resort to physical violence. His weapons were far more insidious. Influence, whispers, carefully planted rumors designed to destroy her reputation and isolate her from the world. Rumors about her mental health, her emotional instability, her professional competence spread like poison through the city's tightly knit social circles. Job offers vanished before she even had a chance to interview. She was blacklisted, ostracized, erased. She retreated into the shadows, moving into a cramped, dilapidated sublet and scraping by with whatever event shifts she could find. She avoided cameras, walked the streets with her hood pulled low, a ghost in her own city. Every day felt like a desperate race to outrun a relentless shadow. But fate, in its infinite complexity, often delivers compassion in the most unexpected forms. One frigid winter night, while setting up for another corporate event, exhaustion overwhelmed her. She collapsed, and when she awoke, she found Silas Hawthorne sitting beside her hospital bed, his face etched with concern. He wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire depicted in magazine profiles. but a man with tired eyes and a grief he made no attempt to conceal. He recognized her. She had been one of the nurses who had comforted his dying wife years ago, offering a moment of solace in his darkest hour. His voice shook with emotion as he thanked her, his gratitude a palpable force. Ava couldn't understand why his simple act of kindness felt like a doorway opening onto a new, unknown landscape. For the first time in years, someone looked at her without suspicion, without judgment, without the possessive gaze of ownership. But she couldn't foresee that their lives were about to become inextricably intertwined in ways neither of them could have imagined, and that the past she desperately tried to bury was about to resurface with devastating force. Manhattan, with its stark contrasts, could be both brutally cruel to the vulnerable and shamelessly indulgent to the powerful. Ava had learned that harsh truth through bitter experience. In the months following her escape from Declan, the city felt like an endless, unforgiving maze designed to swallow women like her. Women with trembling hands, empty bank accounts, and invisible bruises that no one seemed to notice. But that same city, with its cold, glittering facade, would later become the unlikely backdrop of her rebirth, a testament to her resilience and unwavering spirit. Her new life unfolded far from the opulent Tribeca penthouse she had once called home. She now lived in a tiny, walk-up studio apartment in Washington Heights, where the ancient radiator hissed and clanked through the night, and the window offered a view of a rusty fire escape instead of the glittering city skyline. The rent was exorbitant, but it was the only place she could afford without Declan's tainted money, without his suffocating rules. Some nights, when the streets outside were alive with the cacophony of car horns and barking dogs, she pressed a pillow over her ears and whispered to herself, "Freedom has noise, control has silence." It was a mantra, a constant reminder that she had made the right choice, that the price of independence was worth enduring the discomfort. But her days were spent in a vastly different world, a world she had never anticipated entering. After her collapse at the tech conference, Silas Hawthorne, driven by a profound sense of gratitude and a growing admiration for her strength, insisted that she join his foundation as a project coordinator. The office was located in a sleek glass tower on Park Avenue, with polished marble floors that gleamed under the bright lights and elevators that moved with the smooth grace of silk. She felt hopelessly out of place on her first day, clutching her worn thrift store purse while impeccably dressed employees tapped away on their MacBook Pros and planned extravagant charity galas with effortless confidence. Yet Silas, with his quiet authority and genuine warmth, made space for her, not out of pity, but out of respect for her inherent dignity. He introduced her to everyone as an essential addition to our mission, emphasizing her invaluable experience and compassionate nature. He offered her a corner desk near the panoramic windows, where she could watch Central Park stretch out like an emerald blanket beneath the city's towering steel monuments. Some mornings, she arrived early, simply to watch the sunrise paint the skyscrapers in shimmering gold, a daily reminder of the beauty that still existed in the world. It was the first time in years that she felt like she was moving forward, instead of constantly hiding, looking over her shoulder in fear. The foundation itself was a sanctuary, a haven of purpose and compassion compared to the gilded hell that Declan had once paraded her through. Silas's dedicated team, comprised of doctors, researchers, and medical advocates, worked tirelessly to improve neonatal care nationwide. They spoke Ava's old language, the language of compassion, precision, and unwavering calm under pressure. She found herself breathing easier around them, even laughing on mornings when she thought she couldn't possibly drag herself out of bed. Still, she kept her past locked away, not out of shame, but out of a deep-seated fear. Declan had long arms, a seemingly limitless influence, and a burning fury that could tear apart anything she dared to rebuild. The stark contrasts of the city shaped the rhythm of her days. Mornings in the sterile corporate glass, nights in her cramped apartment, lunch hours spent among powerful executives, dinners consisting of microwaved meals eaten alone, emails detailing million-dollar donations, punctuated by desperate phone calls from relentless debt collectors. And woven through it all was the quiet, reassuring presence of Silas, sometimes a soft knock at her office door, sometimes a cup of steaming tea left on her desk when he noticed she looked particularly weary. But the most significant shift in her life occurred outside the confines of the office. Silas began inviting her to a series of high-profile medical galas, insisting that her extensive nursing background made her insights invaluable. The events were held at the very places where she had once cleaned up after hours, toiling in anonymity. The opulent Plaza Hotel ballroom, the exclusive rooftop lounge at the Peninsula, lavish private penthouses overlooking Fifth Avenue. She stood among men in impeccably tailored suits and women in shimmering gowns, feeling like an intruder in someone else's extravagant dream. But Silas never allowed her to fade into the shadows. He stayed close, introducing her to influential donors, ensuring she had a seat at the most important tables. His presence wasn't domineering, like Declan's. It was grounding, like a steadying hand placed gently on the back of a chair. For the first time, Ava felt a glimmer of what safety might truly feel like, a sense of belonging she had long since abandoned. What she didn't know was that Declan, miles away in his darkened penthouse, was watching her rise through a web of whispers and carefully curated photographs, and that the gathering storm within him was about to crash down upon her fragile new world with devastating consequences. And when it did, Manhattan itself would feel smaller, darker, and far more dangerous. Declan Ward had always been the kind of man people whispered about in hushed tones. Handsome in a cold, angular way, immensely powerful in the hushed rooms where money dictated fate, and terrifyingly unpredictable when his authority was challenged. But beneath the polished exterior, beneath the veneer of charm and sophistication, lurked a darker truth, a deep-seated flaw that defined his very being. Declan didn't love people. He possessed them, and losing possession, relinquishing control over someone he considered his own, felt to him like the ultimate humiliation, a personal affront that demanded retribution. After Ava left, his life didn't immediately crumble around him. At first, he deluded himself into believing that she would eventually return, crawling back to him with apologies and tears. Women always came back to him, especially women he had rescued from their mundane existences. But days bled into weeks, and his calls went unanswered. His emails bounced back with cold indifference. The door code to his penthouse, once readily accepted her, now rejected her old combination, a final, irrevocable rejection. Instead of genuine grief, something far uglier and more insidious took root in his heart. Offense, a burning, all-consuming fury. A man like him, accustomed to having everything he desired, simply didn't get abandoned. He could have easily moved on, replaced her with one of the many women who lingered around his business lunches or flocked to his hotel openings, eager to bask in his reflected glory. But Declan didn't want someone new. He wanted control back. He wanted to reclaim what he considered his property. So he struck where it hurt most: her name, her reputation, the very essence of her being. With a single, well-placed phone call to a sympathetic editor at a gossip rag, he ignited the first spark of a malicious rumor, suggesting that she had suffered from emotional instability, hinting at a hidden fragility beneath her quiet demeanor. A month later, the whispers had spread like a virus through the tightly knit nursing networks. A manager at the prestigious hospital they once supported quietly blacklisted her, adding her name to a list of undesirables. A charity director rejected her application before she even had a chance to sit down, her face betraying a mixture of pity and discomfort. Declan didn't orchestrate these acts of sabotage out of pure, unadulterated hatred. He did them out of a twisted sense of entitlement. In his warped mind, Ava owed him her unwavering loyalty for the rest of her life, a debt she could never fully repay for the privilege of being chosen by him. And when he discovered that she had resurfaced, seemingly thriving at Silas Hawthorne's foundation, looking stronger, even glowing with a newfound confidence, his entitlement twisted into a dangerous obsession. At first, he monitored her from a distance, a silent, unseen observer. He hired a private investigator to snap surreptitious photos of Ava entering the sleek glass tower on Park Avenue, sometimes alongside Silas himself. The images, seemingly innocuous, festered inside Declan, fueling his growing rage and resentment. A billionaire. Not just any billionaire, but Silas Hawthorne, the man whose name dominated financial headlines, whose companies shaped the very fabric of the city. A man more powerful, more respected, and more untouchable than Declan could ever hope to be. The comparison burned like acid, stripping away his carefully constructed facade of invincibility. He started visiting his exclusive gym twice a day, pushing himself to the point of exhaustion, lifting weights until his veins bulged and his muscles screamed in protest. He bought a new wardrobe of meticulously tailored suits, practicing in the mirror what he would say, how he would act, when he finally confronted Ava again. But beneath the obsessive grooming rituals, beneath the carefully rehearsed lines, lay a gnawing panic, a deep-seated, choking fear that Ava had finally escaped him, that she had slipped through his fingers and was now beyond his reach. He couldn't allow that to happen. Driven by a desperate need to reclaim control, Declan escalated his tactics, plunging into the murky depths of her past. He began contacting people from Ava's past. Old coworkers, former landlords, anyone who might be willing to hand over even the smallest scraps of information. He learned that she had been briefly hospitalized. He learned that she often worked late, burning the candle at both ends. He learned that her new job involved travel, planning, and interacting with wealthy donors. He twisted those innocuous facts into a venomous narrative, telling himself that she was using Silas, just as she had used him, manipulating him with her false charm and deceptive innocence. When he learned that she was pregnant, the cracks inside him widened with a terrifying force, threatening to shatter him completely. But then he discovered the devastating truth. The babies weren't his. They belonged to Silas Hawthorne. And in that moment, something monstrous awakened within him, a primal rage that consumed all reason and compassion. Instead of accepting defeat, instead of acknowledging that Ava had finally found happiness with another man, Declan convinced himself that the unborn children were leverage, keys to clawing back the power he had lost. He could feign concern, pretend that he wanted to protect her, portray himself as the wronged ex-husband, a devoted figure trying to help a struggling, unstable woman. If the public saw him as a caring, concerned figure, he could easily flip the narrative, painting Ava as an unfit mother and destroying both her and Silas with a single, well-placed story. People underestimated how far a desperate man with money and influence could go. Declan contacted a ruthless lawyer known for bending the law until it screamed, a man who operated in the shadows and specialized in making problems disappear. He purchased confidential medical records through back channels, paying exorbitant sums for information that should have remained private and protected. He began stitching together a fabricated case that could paint Ava as unfit, unstable, reckless, and ultimately dangerous to her own unborn children. His plan wasn't merely cruel. It was surgical, meticulously crafted to inflict maximum damage. Because Declan didn't just want Ava back under his suffocating shadow. He wanted to crush the light she had found without him, to extinguish the hope that had dared to blossom in his absence. And as he meticulously prepared his next move, whispering his twisted justification to the empty rooms of his penthouse, he repeated his delusional mantra. She was mine first, and she'll be mine again. He truly believed it. What he didn't know was that the city he thought he ruled, the city that had always bent to his will, was about to turn against him, one devastating truth at a time. And the woman he thought he could break forever, the woman he had underestimated for so long, was about to fight back harder than he ever imagined, unleashing a force of nature that would leave him reeling. The night everything irrevocably changed for Ava didn't unfold in a dark alleyway or in the sterile privacy of a quiet room. It happened under the dazzling glow of chandeliers worth more than her old annual salary, in a sprawling ballroom filled with people who could buy and sell entire swaths of Manhattan with a single nonchalant phone call. It happened at the Hawthorne Foundation's annual Winter Benefit Gala, a prestigious event that Ava had spent weeks meticulously coordinating, pouring her heart and soul into every detail. It was supposed to be her professional comeback, the night she finally felt she belonged in a world that had once treated her like an outsider, a world that had seemed impossibly glamorous and out of reach. But it became something else entirely, a night of reckoning, a battleground where old wounds reopened and new alliances were forged. The grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel shimmered with opulent gold accents and delicate crystal stems, reflecting the light in a dazzling display of wealth and extravagance. Impeccably dressed waiters glided through the room, balancing trays laden with champagne flutes and canapés, while the crème de la crème of Manhattan's elite drifted through the space, their laughter soft and carefully modulated, their conversations a carefully orchestrated dance of deals disguised as polite chit-chat. Ava moved between tables, her senses heightened, meticulously checking floral arrangements, escorting esteemed medical donors to their assigned seats, and ensuring that the lighting was perfect, creating an atmosphere of understated elegance and warmth. Her dress wasn't a designer creation fresh off the runway, but Silas's perceptive assistant had helped her find one that was both simple and elegant. A comfortable deep navy with long sleeves that cleverly concealed how thin she had become during her months of hiding and hardship. For the first hour, everything felt remarkably peaceful, almost surreal. Ava even caught Silas watching her from across the room as he engaged in a conversation with a prominent senator. His gaze held a warmth, a quiet admiration, and perhaps even a question she couldn't quite decipher. Every time their eyes met, a delicate flutter stirred within her chest, a feeling she wasn't sure she deserved, but couldn't deny its gentle, persistent pull. Then the grand ballroom doors swung open, and Declan Ward strode in, his presence immediately disrupting the carefully cultivated atmosphere of ease and sophistication. The air seemed to thicken, conversations abruptly thinned, and a palpable tension rippled through the room. Even dressed in a classic tuxedo, he looked like a storm had somehow wrapped itself around him, his shoulders rigid, his jaw locked, his eyes scanning the room with the predatory focus of a hunter searching for his prey. Took him a mere 5 seconds to spot Ava across the crowded room. 5 seconds to crush the breath from her lungs, to send a wave of icy dread washing over her. She froze, her body paralyzed with fear. The tray of hors d'oeuvres she was carrying trembled precariously in her hands, threatening to spill its contents onto the pristine white tablecloth. He smiled, that same practiced smile he had used years ago when he first reeled her in. A smile that was soft and seductive on the surface, but sharpened underneath with a hint of menace. "Good evening, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying just loud enough for the nearby guests to turn their heads and take notice, their eyes widening with a mixture of curiosity and morbid fascination. Ava's stomach plummeted. "You don't belong here, Declan. Please just leave." But Declan never did anything she asked. He thrived on creating scenes, on disrupting the carefully constructed order of things. He stepped closer, deliberately invading her personal space in a way that made her instinctively shrink back, his presence radiating a chilling sense of menace. "Relax," he murmured, his voice a low, silken threat. "I just came to talk. You've been ignoring me for months. I'm worried about you." The murmurs in the room intensified, the low hum of polite conversation replaced by a hushed silence. Cameras clicked, capturing every nuance of the unfolding drama. Gossip bloggers smelled blood, sensing a juicy scandal about to erupt. Ava tried to move past him, to escape his suffocating presence, but Declan grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. Not violently, but with the unwavering confidence of a man who believed that no one would dare to interfere, that his power and influence would shield him from any consequences. Silas did. He crossed the ballroom with a speed and purpose that startled the onlookers, guests drawing back like curtains parting on a stage. His presence alone shifted the atmosphere, radiating a quiet but undeniable authority. He was calm, but fiercely protective, quiet, but commanding. When he reached Ava, he positioned himself slightly in front of her, not blocking her entirely, but shielding her from Declan's predatory gaze, a silent declaration of his unwavering support. "Let go of her," Silas said, his voice low and steady, but with an underlying steel that brooked no argument. Declan let out a harsh, derisive laugh. "Are you the boyfriend or just another checkbook she's using?" A gasp rippled through the crowd, the tension in the room reaching a fever pitch. Silas didn't raise his voice, didn't issue a last warning, but Declan thrived on pushing boundaries, especially on crossing lines that others wouldn't dare to approach. He turned toward the nearest photographer and announced loudly, his voice dripping with false concern. "I'm here because I'm worried about my wife. She's unstable. She's been lying to everyone here. People gasped, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Ava's chest tightened painfully, as if an invisible hand were squeezing the air from her lungs. Declan wasn't just humiliating her. He was planting a carefully crafted story, laying the groundwork for his next, devastating attack. "She's sick," Declan continued, his voice laced with a faux pity that made Ava's skin crawl. "She shouldn't be working. She needs help." Ava felt her entire body go cold, her limbs heavy and unresponsive. It was the same tactic he had used before, the same insidious weapon that had effectively ruined her career and isolated her from the world. He was doing it again, but this time on a grander scale, in front of Manhattan's elite, the very people whose respect and acceptance she had finally begun to earn. Before she could react, before Silas could pull her away from the escalating confrontation, Declan leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear, and whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. "You thought you could hide from me? You're carrying secrets, Ava, and soon they'll all be public." His eyes slid briefly to her stomach, a silent acknowledgement of the life she was carrying, and her heart nearly stopped, her blood turning to ice in her veins. He knew. Silas saw the stark terror etched on Ava's face, the fear that had taken root and blossomed in her eyes, and something inside him snapped, igniting a fierce protective instinct he had never known he possessed. He stepped forward, blocking Declan entirely, his body a solid barrier between Ava and the man who had caused her so much pain. His voice was low and deadly, a barely controlled growl that sent a shiver down the spines of those who overheard him. "Leave now, because if you don't, the next headline won't be about Ava. It'll be about you." Declan smirked, backing away slowly, his eyes glinting with a mixture of malice and triumph. "We'll see." The damage was already done, and as the whispers spread like wildfire around the ballroom, Ava realized that Declan hadn't just shown up to embarrass her, to disrupt her fragile peace. He had shown up to declare war, to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. And this time he had nothing to lose, making him even more dangerous than before. Ava didn't remember how she managed to escape the ballroom. One moment, she was standing under the dazzling golden chandeliers, surrounded by the glittering elite of Manhattan. The next, she was gripping the cold marble countertop of a restroom, desperately trying not to collapse, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her breath came in short, painful bursts, each inhale a struggle. Her vision blurred around the edges, the once familiar surroundings distorted and alien. The noise of the gala, the hushed whispers, the incessant camera shutters, the murmur of polite conversation, echoed in her mind like a haunting, discordant chorus, a cacophony of judgment and condemnation. Declan had done it again. He had found her. He had humiliated her. He had planted seeds of doubt and suspicion in front of the very people who had finally respected her, the people who had given her a second chance at life. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. A pale, gaunt face, trembling lips, eyes wide and glossy with fear, reflecting the terror that consumed her. "Not again," she whispered, her voice barely audible, cracking with despair. "Please, not again." Her hands shook so violently that she had to steady them against the cool surface of the sink, the cold marble a fleeting comfort. A soft knock on the restroom door broke the suffocating silence. "Ava?" Silas's voice, low and controlled, but heavy with concern, filtered through the door. "Let me in." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The door opened anyway, slowly and carefully, as if he feared startling her, the silence amplifying the sound of the latch clicking open. When he stepped inside, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, his tie slightly askew, his usual composure momentarily shattered, his expression shifted from worry to heartbreak, a raw emotion that tore at Ava's already frayed nerves. He moved toward her, his steps measured and deliberate, but stopped a few feet away, respecting her need for space, a silent acknowledgement of her pain. "Ava, breathe," he said gently, his voice a soothing balm against the storm raging within her. But breathing felt impossible, each inhale a painful reminder of her vulnerability. The room tilted precariously, and tears finally spilled over, a torrent of pent-up emotion she could no longer contain. She pressed both hands to her face, her body sinking down until she was huddled on the cold, tiled floor, her limbs drawn in tight against her chest, as if trying to become small enough to disappear, to simply cease to exist. Her body curled in on itself, a desperate attempt to find a semblance of safety in the face of overwhelming fear. Silas lowered himself to the floor too, keeping a respectful distance, allowing her the space she needed to grieve, but his presence a silent promise that she wasn't alone. "You're safe," he said softly, his voice a low, reassuring murmur. "He can't touch you here." She shook her head, her body racked with sobs. "It doesn't matter. He always finds me. Every time he ruins everything. Silas, I can't go through this again. I can't survive another." Her voice broke, the weight of years of fear and oppression crushing her, threatening to suffocate her completely. Silas's jaw tightened, not with anger at her, but with a white-hot fury directed at the man who had inflicted so much pain, at the man who had systematically chipped away at her spirit, leaving her broken and vulnerable. He had witnessed trauma before, had seen the devastating effects of abuse firsthand. He had even lived through his own share of hardship, enduring the profound grief of losing his beloved wife. But seeing Ava crumble like this, witnessing her unravel before his eyes, ignited something fierce and unwavering inside him, a desire to protect her at all costs. "Ava," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "look at me." She did, hesitantly, her eyes red and swollen, filled with a deep-seated despair that tore at his heart. "You didn't do anything wrong tonight," he insisted, his voice firm and unwavering. "He did, and I won't let him keep taking pieces of you." Her throat closed with emotion, the words lodging there, unspoken. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to cling to the hope that he offered, but Declan's shadow felt endless, a darkness that seemed to stretch into every corner of her life. "I'm pregnant," she finally whispered, the words slipping out not as a joyful announcement, but as a surrender, a final, desperate plea for understanding. Silas froze, his body going completely still. For a moment, he didn't breathe, didn't blink, his expression unreadable. The noise of the gala outside faded completely, the music and conversation dissolving into a distant hum. He stared at her as if trying to comprehend the enormity of her words, as if trying to understand whether she meant what he thought she meant. You're pregnant?" His voice was quiet, almost shaky, betraying the depth of his surprise. Ava nodded, tears spilling down her face faster now, a torrent of relief and fear washing over her. "Triplets," she managed to choke out, the word barely audible above the sound of her sobs. Silas's hand flew to his mouth, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Triplets? And you were carrying this alone, enduring all of this by yourself? I didn't want to drag you into my mess," she whispered, her voice filled with self-reproach. "You have your company, your IPO, your whole life. You don't need—" "I need you alive," he said, the words bursting out before he could fully contain them, his voice cracking with a raw emotion that startled her. Just enough for her to hear the unvarnished truth, the depth of his concern for her well-being. Ava blinked, stunned by the intensity of his words. She'd never heard desperation in his voice before, not when his company faced a crisis, not when relentless reporters hounded him for information. But now, over the fear that threatened to consume her, he sounded like a man terrified of losing something irreplaceable. He moved closer, slowly, extending his hand toward her, his touch tentative, as if afraid of shattering her completely. "Let me help you, Ava. Let me protect you. You don't have to hide from me anymore." But Ava pulled back, hugging her knees tighter to her chest, her body trembling. "Declan will destroy you, Silas. He'll use the babies, the rumors, the past. He'll twist everything. He always wins." Silas leaned forward, his voice low and certain, his eyes unwavering. "Not this time." Her tears stopped, not because she suddenly believed him, but because her body had simply run out of them, her emotions exhausted, her spirit drained. He finally reached for her hand, his fingers gently brushing against hers. This time she didn't pull away, and for a moment, on that cold bathroom floor, under the harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by the echoes of a shattered evening, Ava allowed herself one fragile sliver of hope to flicker in the darkness. She didn't know it yet, but Declan's attack had not broken her. It had awakened something dormant within her, a fierce determination to fight for her life, for her children, and for her own hard-won freedom. And soon, the world would see a version of Ava Reynolds that no one, not even Declan, was prepared for. A woman who had emerged from the shadows, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The morning after the devastating gala felt strangely quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Ava woke in her tiny studio apartment, sunlight leaking through the gaps in the blinds, her body still trembling from the emotional turmoil of the night before. Her phone buzzed incessantly, a constant stream of missed calls, frantic texts from concerned coworkers, and insidious messages from journalists fishing for gossip, eager to capitalize on her misfortune. She didn't open any of them. She lay still, curled up on her side, one hand protectively over her stomach, whispering reassurances to the 3 fragile lives nestled within her. "Hold on, my little ones. Please just hold on." A sharp knock at the door shattered the fragile peace, jolting her from her thoughts. For one terrifying moment, she froze, her blood turning to ice. Declan? Her heart slammed against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. She shuffled backward, grabbing her phone, her fingers fumbling with the buttons, ready to call 911 if necessary. But then she heard a voice, a deep, calm, familiar voice that washed over her like a wave of relief. "Ava, it's me, Silas." Relief flooded her body so fast that she nearly collapsed, her muscles going weak with the sudden release of tension. She stumbled to the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the lock, and Silas stepped inside, carrying a paper bag from a small, unassuming bakery downtown. He looked haggard, like a man who hadn't slept in days. "I came as soon as I could," Silas said, his voice strained. "We need to talk." Ava's muscles tightened, a knot forming in her stomach. "About last night, Silas. Please, let's just forget it." "No," he interrupted, his eyes filled with a strange urgency. "It's about this." He reached inside his expensive coat and produced a small, pristine envelope. Her name was written on the front in elegant, sloping script. Ava's breath hitched in her throat. The handwriting was unmistakable. This is from her?" she whispered, the words barely audible. Silas nodded, his voice low and thick with emotion. "My wife left this for you." The room seemed to tilt, the expensive furniture blurring at the edges of her vision. Years ago, during her time in the NICU, Ava had been one of Elise Hawthorne's primary nurses, caring for her during her final, agonizing weeks. Elise had been a wisp of a woman, her spirit gentle and her voice soft, always apologizing for the space she occupied, even as she fought a losing battle. Ava had held her hand through countless long nights, offering comfort when the pain became unbearable, witnessing her quiet grace in the face of unimaginable suffering. She had never imagined that Elise would think of her after her passing. "Silas, why would she leave me something?" Ava asked, her voice trembling, barely a breath. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "She only wrote 3 letters before she passed. One for me, one for her sister, and one for you." Ava stared at the envelope, a mix of dread and disbelief warring within her. She was almost afraid to touch it, as if it held some potent magic she couldn't comprehend. "What does it say?" Silas looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, a complex tapestry of fear and fragile hope woven together. "I don't know. I never opened it." She sealed it and told the nurse to give it to the woman with the steady hands and a gentle soul. "She didn't know your name, but she knew you mattered." Ava felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. With trembling fingers, she finally opened the envelope. The paper inside was thin and delicate, almost translucent. The ink was slightly faded, as if time itself had worn it down. Her eyes darted across the first few lines, and her heart cracked open, a wave of grief and something akin to wonder washing over her. Dear nurse, she read, her voice barely a whisper. Asterisk, if you are reading this, I am gone. But I need you to know something. My husband deserves a chance to love again. I need him to be happy, too. Please don't let him close himself off forever. Ava covered her mouth with her hand, trying to stifle a sob. Silas watched her, his own composure unraveling as he witnessed the glistening tears in her eyes. Keep reading, he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. Ava continued, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. Asterisk, you have a kindness he will recognize, a steadiness he needs. If he finds you someday, don't be afraid to let him in. Tears blurred the rest of the words, but Ava understood the essence of the message. Elise had given them permission, a blessing from beyond the grave, before their path together had even begun to unfold. Ava looked up at Silas, stunned, overwhelmed by the weight of Elise's words. Silas, why did you show me this now? His voice broke, a raw, vulnerable sound. Because last night, when you told me you were pregnant, when I saw fear instead of joy in your eyes, I realized something. You don't believe you deserve a future. You think Declan destroyed that for you. He stepped closer, gently touching her wrist, his eyes searching hers. My wife didn't write that letter for fate, he whispered, his voice hoarse. She wrote it for you. Ava's tears flowed freely now, falling onto the fragile paper in her hands. But then her phone buzzed again, shattering the fragile peace that had settled between them. A text message from an unknown number. She opened it, her fingers trembling. One photo, Declan standing outside her building, looking straight up at her window. A chill sliced through her spine, colder than any winter wind. Silas saw the screen, and his expression hardened into something lethal, all the vulnerability vanishing, replaced by a steely resolve. It's starting, he whispered, his voice grim, and Ava finally understood. Elisa's letter wasn't just a blessing. It was a warning. Ava had spent years shrinking into corners, into silence, into versions of herself that felt safer because they were smaller, less visible. But the moment she saw Declan standing outside her building in that photo, staring up like a hunter tracking his prey, something inside her snapped, not in fear this time, but in defiance. He found me again, Ava whispered, staring at her phone as if the pixels themselves could burn her. Silas gently took the device from her hand, his touch surprisingly tender despite the anger radiating from him. Then he's about to find out he made a mistake. Ava blinked at him, confused by the intensity in his eyes. Silas, you don't understand. Declan doesn't stop. He doesn't back down. The more cornered he feels, the worse he gets. Silas gave her a long, steady look, his gaze unwavering. Then we stopped giving him corners to hide in. It shouldn't have made sense, not after all the years of fear and hiding. But it did. For the first time in years, Ava felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. The presence of someone who would stand between her and the storm without expecting anything in return. He held out his hand, his expression resolute. Come with me. She hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Where? To start taking back your life. The ride to Midtown was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Silas drove instead of letting his driver handle it, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Maybe because he didn't want another set of eyes involved, another potential leak. Maybe because he wanted Ava to feel safe, cocooned in the privacy of his car. The soft hum of the Mercedes and the glow of the city lights passing by felt strangely protective, a stark contrast to the terror that had gripped her just moments before. He parked beneath a sleek tower of glass, Hawthorne Global's private headquarters. Ava had only been here once, months ago, to drop off documents for the foundation. She never imagined walking inside at Silas's side, let alone under these circumstances. The lobby lights reflected off the polished marble floors, creating an atmosphere of cold, corporate power. Security guards stood a little straighter when Silas entered, their faces impassive, but he gave them a simple nod instead of the usual corporate severity. They let Ava through without question, their eyes betraying nothing. They took the elevator to the 58th floor, the doors gliding open into a conference suite bigger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like a living painting, the twinkling lights stretching out as far as the eye could see. Ava felt small again, but not powerless. The city looked different from up here, the vastness of the world laid out before her, highlighting the insignificance of men like Declan in the grand scheme of things. Silas gestured toward a chair, his movements precise and controlled. Sit. Not an order, but an invitation. On the table in front of her sat a laptop, several neatly stacked documents, and a sleek black folder stamped with the Hawthorne family crest, a symbol of wealth and influence that had always felt so distant. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice laced with apprehension. Silas exhaled deeply, as if releasing a pent-up breath he had been holding for years. "Everything you need to protect yourself. Legally, financially, physically." Ava frowned, confusion clouding her features. "Silas." But he raised a hand gently, silencing her. "Just listen." And she did, compelled by the intensity in his eyes. "There's a misconception about men like Declan," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "People think their power comes from money, but it doesn't. It comes from fear, from isolation, from convincing their victims that they're alone, that they have nowhere to turn." His eyes softened, a flicker of empathy in their depths. "You're not alone anymore." Ava swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it difficult to breathe. He opened the black folder, revealing the contents within. Inside were papers she didn't expect, documents that spoke of swift, decisive action. Restraining order drafts, a security detail roster with photos and detailed profiles, a private investigator's report detailing Declan's recent movements, and a legal declaration of paternal responsibility with Silas's signature already affixed. Ava gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Silas, what did you do?" He met her eyes, his gaze unwavering. "I'm protecting the mother of my children." Her heart stuttered, a wave of emotion washing over her. No one had ever said words like that to her, not with such sincerity, not with such unwavering conviction, not with love disguised as steel. "But you don't have to." "I want to." Ava felt something shift inside her, something heavy, something old and deeply buried, finally beginning to stir. Fear didn't vanish entirely, but it loosened its grip, allowing something new to bloom in its place. Resolve. Silas stood and walked to a side cabinet, his movements fluid and purposeful. When he returned, he held a small velvet box in his hands. Not a ring, but something else entirely. He opened it, revealing a delicate necklace with a simple, shining pendant. "This belonged to Elise," he said quietly, his voice filled with reverence. "She wanted you to have it someday." Ava's breath hitched in her throat, tears welling up in her eyes once more. I can't." "She believed in you," Silas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And now I do too." He reached out and clasped the necklace around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin. It felt like armor, a tangible symbol of protection and hope. She looked at her reflection in the window, her eyes drawn to the pendant resting against her chest. Messy hair, tired eyes, trembling hands, but with a spark she hadn't seen in years. Strength. Silas stepped beside her, his presence a solid anchor in the swirling storm of her emotions. "Ava, you've survived things most people couldn't even imagine. Now it's time to stop surviving." He touched her hand gently, his gaze intense, "and start fighting back." Ava lifted her chin, her gaze meeting his in the reflection. For the first time in years, she believed she could. What she didn't know was that Declan, watching from his penthouse across the river, had already seen the lights turn on in Silas's office, a beacon of defiance in the night. And he was about to make one more deadly mistake, underestimating the woman he thought he had broken forever. The following week unfolded like a storm Ava didn't see coming until she realized she was no longer the woman hiding from thunder. She was walking directly into it, chin raised, heart pounding, but unbroken. Silas had arranged everything quietly, methodically, with a strategist's precision and a protector's urgency. Ava didn't know where he found the time, but he seemed determined to put an entire army between her and Declan. And yet, it wasn't enough for Silas to shield her in private. He wanted the world to know the truth, to strip Declan of his power, which thrived in shadows and silence. It began with an invitation Ava didn't understand at first. A press conference hosted by the Hawthorne Foundation at the River Cafe, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. She thought it would be about a new neonatal program, something medical or charitable, a cause close to her heart. Instead, she walked into a venue filled with reporters, donors, cameras, a sea of faces that seemed to blur into a single, expectant gaze. The air crackled with anticipation, so thick it felt like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something explosive. She tugged at her sleeves nervously, her palms sweating. "Silas, what is this?" He didn't answer immediately, his focus elsewhere. He adjusted his cufflinks, the subtle movement betraying a hint of the tension he was holding within. Mont Blanc, she reckoned before turning to her with an expression she had never seen on him before. A mix of purpose and quiet fury. "It's time," he said, his voice low and steady. "People need to hear the truth from you, not him." Ava's breath caught in her throat, her pulse hammering in her ears. "No, Silas, I can't. If Declan sees me up there." "That's the point," he said softly, his eyes searching hers, offering a silent reassurance. "He won't own your story anymore." Her pulse raced, a dizzying mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. "But the pregnancy, it will reveal things you're not ready for," he promised. But the rumors he spread at the gala, the comments, the lies. "Ava, you deserve a voice." She didn't think she had one out anymore. But when Silas offered his hand, steady and warm, she took it, trusting him implicitly, despite the fear that threatened to consume her. They walked together to the front of the room, the bright lights searing her eyes, the murmurs of the crowd rising as cameras clicked rapidly, capturing every movement. Ava felt her throat tighten, constricting her ability to breathe, but Silas stood just to her right, close enough for her to feel his reassuring presence, but far enough for her to speak on her own, to find her own strength. A journalist called out, "Miss Reynolds, is it true your ex-husband claims you're mentally unstable?" Another voice, sharper and more accusatory, "Are you using the Hawthorne Foundation to rebuild your image?" A third, "Is it true you disappeared for months?" Why? The barrage of questions hit her like bullets, each one a reminder of the lies Declan had spread, the control he had exerted, the damage he had inflicted. Ava almost stepped back, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught. Then she remembered Elisa's letter, tucked safely away in her purse. The words that spoke of a gentle soul and a deserving heart. The reminder that Silas deserved a chance to love again. That tiny piece of paper felt like a shield, warding off the negativity that threatened to engulf her. She leaned toward the microphone, her hand trembling slightly, and spoke, her voice unsteady, but audible. "My name is Ava Reynolds," she began, "and I'm here because someone has been trying to decide my story for me." The room fell silent, the reporters leaning forward, their pens poised, ready to capture every word. Ava continued, her voice strengthening as she spoke, drawing on a well of inner strength she didn't know she possessed. "For years, I lived in fear of Declan Ward. Behind closed doors, he controlled my finances, isolated me from my friends and family, manipulated my medical records, and spread lies when I finally found the courage to leave." A ripple of shock went through the crowd, a collective gasp as the truth began to emerge. Ava swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over, but kept going, determined to speak her truth, no matter the cost. "I stayed quiet because I was ashamed, because I thought no one would believe me, that I was somehow responsible for the abuse I endured. Last week at the gala, he approached me publicly, attempting to reassert his control, to silence me once again. He humiliated me, made veiled threats, tried to suggest I was unstable, unfit, a danger to myself and others." She paused, taking a deep breath, gathering her strength. "I'm not unstable," she said firmly, her voice ringing with conviction. "I'm a survivor." Reporters leaned forward, their pens scratching furiously on their notepads. their faces etched with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. For the first time, I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing to speak, and I'm choosing to say his name. Not because he deserves the attention, but because I deserve freedom. Flashbulbs erupted, blindingly bright, capturing her every expression, every nuance of her voice. Ava's heart hammered in her chest, a wild, frantic rhythm that threatened to overwhelm her. Something inside her cracked open, not like breaking, but like a shell falling away, revealing the strength and resilience she had kept hidden for so long. She stepped back from the mic, trembling, her legs feeling weak beneath her. Silas placed a hand on the small of her back, a silent gesture of support, his presence a comforting weight beside her. "You were perfect," he whispered, his voice filled with pride. But before Ava could respond, before she could fully absorb the weight of what she had just done, someone shouted from the doorway, a voice that sent a shiver of dread down her spine. "Well, isn't this sweet?" The room turned as one, all eyes focusing on the figure standing in the entrance. Declan Ward stood there, smirking, confident, flanked by two lawyers, their faces grim and unyielding. Ava's blood went cold, her body instinctively tensing in anticipation of the inevitable confrontation. Silas stepped in front of her instantly, his body a shield, his posture radiating a protective ferocity. The showdown they had both feared was happening, here and now, in front of every camera in New York. And Declan's next words made the temperature of the room drop even further. "You forgot to mention the most important part of your story. Ava, tell them who got you pregnant." Gasps filled the room, a collective intake of breath that echoed through the silent space. Ava felt the ground shift beneath her feet, the carefully constructed foundation of her courage crumbling under the weight of Declan's calculated cruelty. Silas stiffened beside her, his muscles taut, his jaw clenched. But the real shock, the devastating blow that threatened to shatter her completely, was this. Ava realized Declan had planned this moment all along, orchestrated the entire scenario to maximize her humiliation and regain control. For a moment, the world stopped moving, the sounds of the city fading into a muted hum. Cameras froze mid-click, their lenses trained on the unfolding drama. Coffee cups hovered half-lifted, their contents threatening to spill. Dozens of reporters stared wide-eyed at Declan Ward, their pens trembling, hungry for scandal, their faces a mixture of shock and predatory excitement. Ava felt her stomach twist so violently she had to grip the podium to keep from collapsing, the wood digging into her palms. Declan's voice, smooth and poisonous, echoed through the room like a venomous bell, each word dripping with malice. "Go on, Ava," he taunted, his eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. "Tell them who the father is." Ava's throat closed, her vocal cords paralyzed with fear. She felt exposed, cornered, stripped of all the strength she had so painstakingly gathered. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out the sounds of the room. The room blurred, the faces in the crowd swirling around her like distorted masks. All she could hear was his voice from years ago, cold, commanding, cruel, echoing the words he had used to control her, to break her spirit. "You'll never survive without me. You'll never be believed. You'll always come back." Her breath hitched, a sob rising in her chest. Then Silas stepped forward, his movements calm and deliberate, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. He didn't raise his voice, didn't display any outward anger. He simply stood between Ava and Declan, a wall forged from something unbreakable, a barrier that could not be breached. "You don't speak to her?" Silas said, his voice dangerously low, a barely audible growl that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. Declan smirked, his eyes narrowing. "Oh, look, the billionaire prince defending his damsel. Cute, but the public has a right to know." "No," Silas cut in sharply, his voice like ice. "You have a desire to cause harm. That's not the same thing." Reporters gasped, their pens scratching furiously on their notepads. Some scribbled furiously, while others lifted their phones to record the explosive exchange. Declan wasn't expecting resistance, not like this, not a direct challenge to his power. His smug smile faltered for a split second, a crack appearing in his carefully constructed facade. But he recovered quickly, masking his surprise with a sneer. "Fine," he snapped, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I'll say it myself. Ava ran away from me, disappeared for months, and suddenly reappears pregnant. And now she's working for him. Do the math." A few cameras swung toward Ava, their lenses like accusing eyes. Shame rose in her chest like a wave, threatening to drown her, to pull her under into the depths of her old fears. Her legs trembled, threatening to buckle beneath her. She wanted to run, hide, disappear, to escape the scrutiny and the judgment, to crawl back into the shadows where she had spent so many years. But then she saw Silas's reflection in the window behind the crowd, a fleeting glimpse of his unwavering support, the way his jaw tensed with controlled fury, the way his shoulders squared in a silent declaration of war, the way his entire body shifted closer, as if he were silently telling her, "You're not facing him alone anymore." Ava inhaled, drawing strength from his silent presence. Her trembling stopped, her resolve hardening. She stepped out from behind Silas, taking a step towards Declan, towards the light, towards her own liberation. Her voice was soft at first, barely a whisper, but it carried through the silent room. "Dean, stop." He raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise, but his eyes betrayed his unease. "Finally finding your voice, sweetheart? It's about time." A flicker of old fear tried to surface, a ghost of the terror he had once instilled in her. But Ava crushed it, refusing to allow him to control her anymore. "No, I'm finding yours," she said, her voice growing stronger, more confident with each word. "The one you used to silence me all those years." The room went still, every eye fixed on her. Ava steadied herself on the podium, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge, and continued, her voice ringing with newfound defiance. "Yes, I'm pregnant with triplets." Her voice shook slightly, betraying her vulnerability, but she kept going, refusing to back down. "And no, they're not yours. They were never yours. You lost the right to my life a long time ago." Silas swallowed hard behind her, his gaze fixed on Declan, his expression unreadable. Reporters leaned forward, breathless, their pens poised, ready to capture every detail. Ava continued, her voice louder now, resonating with the power of her truth. "I didn't hide because I was ashamed. I hid because I was afraid. Afraid of you. Afraid of the man who controlled my life so tightly. I couldn't breathe." Her voice cracked, betraying the depth of her pain, but she refused to let it break. "But I'm not afraid anymore." A murmur of support rippled through the room, a wave of empathy washing over her. Declan's face darkened, his features contorting with rage. "You think this changes anything?" he snapped, his voice dripping with venom. He held up a folder, his hand trembling with suppressed fury. "I have medical records, proof of instability, proof she's unfit. I'll get custody. You won't be able to stop me." "Stolen records." A voice called from the back of the room, cutting through the tension like a knife. Everyone turned, their heads snapping towards the source of the interruption. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes stepped forward, her presence commanding. Deborah Collins, Silas's lead attorney, known in New York's legal world as a hurricane in heels, a force to be reckoned with, a woman who never lost a case. She held up her own folder, her expression unwavering. "Those files were purchased illegally. We have documentation, timestamps, witness statements, and digital forensics tying the acquisition directly to you, Mr. Ward." Declan blinked, his carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Deborah continued, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet, each word delivered with laser precision. "Interfering with medical privacy is a felony. So is harassment. So is stalking. And so is defamation." Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every flicker of emotion on Declan's face, every bead of sweat on his brow. Declan stuttered, his composure dissolving under the weight of Deborah's accusations. This is ridiculous. She's lying. They're framing me." No, Ava said softly, cutting him off, her voice steady and unwavering. You framed yourself. Silas stepped beside her, his presence solid and unwavering, his gaze fixed on Declan, his expression a warning. Equal solid, present. He spoke calmly, each word measured and deliberate, carrying the weight of his power and influence. Leave her alone, because from this moment on, every move you make, every threat, every whisper will be recorded, reported, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Declan stared at both of them, his eyes darting between Ava and Silas. And for the first time, Ava saw something in his eyes she had never seen before: fear. But he masked it quickly, covering his vulnerability with a sneer. This isn't over. Silas leaned in just enough for Declan to hear, his voice a low growl. It is. And as security moved toward Declan, their movements swift and decisive, cameras flashing like lightning, the room erupted in chaos. The world had just witnessed the beginning of his downfall. Declan Ward didn't disappear quietly after the press conference. Not men like him, not men whose egos crumbled louder than glass on marble. The moment security escorted him out, reporters swarmed, cameras exploding like fireworks as he shoved past them, muttering curses Ava couldn't hear. But she didn't need to. She knew that look in his eyes, the look of a man who felt humiliated, cornered, and dangerously unpredictable. That night, Ava sat in Silas's car, her hands trembling in her lap. The city lights streaked across the windows like gold scratches, each passing block tightening the knot in her chest. Silas kept glancing at her, worry etched in every line of his face, his concern palpable. You don't have to talk, he said gently, his voice soothing. Just breathe. But breathing felt like swallowing broken glass, each inhale a painful reminder of the fear that still lingered, the knowledge that Declan wouldn't simply disappear. Silas, this is going to get worse, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engine. He didn't disagree, didn't offer false reassurances. Instead, he reached across the console and intertwined their fingers, his touch grounding, reassuring. Whatever comes next, you're not facing it alone. She wanted to believe that, wanted desperately to believe this wasn't one of those moments where hope slips through your fingers right when you need it most. But Ava had survived Declan before, and she knew the storm he carried inside him didn't simply pass. It detonated, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. When she finally reached her apartment, Silas didn't leave. He insisted on walking her upstairs, his presence a reassuring shield against the darkness. The hallway lights flickered erratically as they approached her door, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Ava noticed something immediately, a subtle detail that sent a jolt of fear through her veins. Her welcome mat was crooked, just slightly, askew in a way she never left it. Her heartbeat spiked, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. Silas, she whispered, stepping back, her voice barely audible. Someone's been here. He stiffened, his senses on high alert, positioning himself in front of her, ready to protect her from whatever lay behind the door. He gently tested the door handle, his movements cautious and deliberate. Unlocked. Ava's breath caught in her throat, her body paralyzed with fear. Silas pushed the door open slowly, inch by inch, revealing the darkness within. The apartment was dark, too quiet, the silence amplifying the sense of unease. Then, as he reached inside and turned on the light, both of them froze, their blood running cold. The place wasn't ransacked, nothing of value was stolen, but every drawer was pulled open, their contents spilling onto the floor. Every cabinet door was ajar, revealing the emptiness within. Every photograph was turned face down, their images hidden from view. A message without words, a violation far deeper than theft, a chilling reminder of Declan's power to invade her life, to touch her without physically being there. Ava's knees buckled, and Silas caught her before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her protectively. She pressed both hands over her mouth, trying to stifle the sobs that threatened to overwhelm her, her body shaking violently. He was here, she whispered, her voice choked with terror. He came here. Silas held her close, his voice tight with fury, his words a vow. He won't ever come back. Promise. But Ava wasn't convinced. Declan didn't need to break things to break her. He only needed to remind her he could touch her life whenever he wished, that she was never truly safe. The next morning, Deborah Collins arrived at her apartment with 2 private security agents, their presence a stark reminder of the danger Ava was in. She walked through the apartment like a seasoned crime scene analyst, her heels clicking with purpose on the hardwood floors, her eyes scanning every detail, searching for clues. "He's escalating," Deborah said, her voice grim, her expression unwavering. "This wasn't random. This was psychological. He wants you to know he's watching you, that he can reach you, that you're still under his control." Ava sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket Silas had brought from his car, her body still shaking from the aftereffects of the previous night's terror. "He wants me to know he's watching." Silas paced the room, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle ticked in his cheek, his frustration and anger palpable. "I'll hire 20 guards if I have to. She's not staying here another night." Deborah nodded, her agreement swift and decisive. "Agreed. Ava, pack whatever you need. You're moving into Silas's penthouse." Ava looked up, startled, her eyes widening in surprise. "I can't. It's too much. I don't want to impose." "This isn't about want," Deborah said softly, her voice firm but gentle. "It's about safety. And right now, yours is compromised." Silas knelt in front of Ava, taking her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. "Ava, let me protect you. Please." Her eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, but from the shocking tenderness of his plea, the depth of his unwavering commitment. No one had ever protected her without condition, without expecting something in return. She nodded, unable to speak, the lump in her throat preventing her from uttering a single word. Silas exhaled shakily, relief flooding him, his grip tightening on her hands. But before he could help her stand, Ava's phone buzzed, breaking the fragile moment of connection. A text from an unknown number. One sentence, chillingly simple, devastatingly effective. "Asterisk, you shouldn't have embarrassed me." Silas read it over her shoulder, his face draining of color, replaced with a cold fury Ava had never seen on him before. A rage that simmered beneath the surface, threatening to erupt. Deborah grabbed the phone, her expression hardening. "He made his first mistake tonight. Now we make sure it's his last." But even as they prepared to move her out, even as they took steps to ensure her safety, Ava felt it deep in her bones, a sense of foreboding that she couldn't shake. Declan wasn't finished. He was only beginning, and his next move would be far more dangerous than a broken boundary, a reminder that he still had the power to touch her life. Ava never imagined she would step inside Silas Hawthorne's penthouse as anything other than a visitor, an outsider looking in on a world of unimaginable wealth and privilege. But that night, she entered as someone in hiding, someone in danger, someone carrying 3 fragile lives and a past that refused to die quietly. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse living room, revealing a sweeping view of the Manhattan skyline, the glittering lights stretching out as far as the eye could see. Glass walls framed the glowing city like a living, breathing painting, a breathtaking panorama that should have filled her with awe. At another time, the sight would have taken her breath away. Tonight, she barely noticed it. Silas guided her inside with a protective hand at her back, his presence a reassuring weight. His security staff scanned every corner, every door, every blind spot, their movements efficient and silent. Only once they gave the all-clear, their faces impassive, did Silas finally exhale, releasing the tension he had been holding within. "It's safe," he said softly, his voice filled with a hope that mirrored her own. Ava swallowed, the lump in her throat preventing her from speaking. "For now," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. He hesitated, his gaze searching hers, before gently brushing her cheek with his thumb, his touch lingering, as if reassuring himself that she was real, that she was safe. "For as long as it takes." Deborah Collins set her briefcase on the counter, her movements crisp and efficient, and cleared her throat, breaking the fragile moment of connection. "There's still one issue," she said, her voice matter-of-fact, devoid of emotion. "Declan isn't acting alone." Ava stiffened, her muscles tensing. "What do you mean?" Silas turned toward Deborah, his body radiating tension, every line of his body tightening with barely suppressed anger. "Explain." Deborah opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet, her fingers swiping across the screen. On the screen was a list of security breach reports, internal emails, timestamps from surveillance logs, a digital trail of betrayal. "There's a leak," she said, her voice flat, devoid of inflection. "Inside your company." Silas's jaw clenched, his expression incredulous. "Impossible. My system is impenetrable. It's not hacked." Deborah interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "Compromised," she said, emphasizing the word. She tapped one file, highlighting a name. Noah Ellis, Silas's personal aide, the one who scheduled his meetings, coordinated his travel, and frequently interacted with Ava during her shifts at the foundation. He was soft-spoken, polite, and unfailingly efficient, a master of organization, the kind of person you never noticed because everything he touched worked seamlessly. Ava's stomach twisted, a wave of nausea washing over her. "Noah, why would he?" "Money," Deborah said, stating the obvious. "Declan paid him handsomely." Silas looked genuinely stunned, his disbelief evident. "Noah has been with me for 8 years. Which is exactly why Declan targeted him," Deborah replied, her voice devoid of sympathy. "Declan doesn't strike at your strength, Silas. He strikes at your blind spots, at the people you trust implicitly." Ava felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine, the realization hitting her with full force. Declan wasn't just following her, wasn't just reacting to her actions. He was watching her, studying her, anticipating her every move, using someone she trusted to gain access to her life. Silas rubbed a hand over his face, his expression a mixture of anger and betrayal, processing the information, trying to understand how he could have been so blind. What did Noah give him? Deborah hesitated, her silence amplifying the dread that already consumed Ava. Your schedule, Ava's medical appointments, and the building access logs. Ava's breath hitched, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. He knew when I'd be alone. Deborah nodded grimly, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and understanding. This is how he knew when to break into your apartment, when to avoid the neighbors when you'd return from the gala. He was one step ahead of us the whole time. Ava felt nausea grip her, her head spinning. Every moment of safety she thought she had, every flicker of hope she had dared to embrace, suddenly felt like a trap, a carefully constructed illusion designed to lull her into a false sense of security. Silas crouched beside her, taking her shaking hands in his touch gentle but firm. "Ava, look at me." She lifted her eyes to his, her gaze searching his, seeking reassurance, seeking a glimmer of hope in the darkness. "This is not your fault," he said, his voice unwavering. "None of this is your fault. You were in danger," Noah said, his voice barely a whisper. Deborah scoffed, her eyes blazing. "Whatever it took to buy your loyalty, that's what Declan offered, isn't it?" Noah's voice cracked, laced with a guilt that seemed to consume him from the inside out. "I swear I didn't know he would go this far. I never imagined he'd break into her home, or follow her, or threaten her." Ava rose slowly, a chilling calm washing over her features. "Noah, after everything Silas has done for you, how could you even believe a word that comes out of Declan's mouth?" Noah's shoulders sagged, the weight of his betrayal crushing him. "Because he showed me something about the babies." Silas stiffened, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What are you talking about?" Noah's voice trembled, fear lacing every syllable. He said one of them might not survive, that there were complications you weren't aware of. Ava's heart stopped, the blood draining from her face. "What complications?" she choked out, the question barely audible. Noah looked at Silas, then back at Ava, his features a mask of shame and regret. I didn't want to tell you like this, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But the last ultrasound report. Declan got a copy before you did. The color drained from Silas's face, his jaw clenching as he fought to maintain his composure. Ava pressed a hand to her stomach, panic rising within her like an inferno. What did he see? What was in that report? She demanded, her voice laced with desperation. Noah's answer shattered the fragile sanctuary of the room. One of the baby's hearts, struggling. Ava's legs buckled beneath her, the world tilting precariously on its axis. Silas caught her before she could fall, his strong arms wrapping around her protectively. Everything narrowed to the 3 fragile beats of life within her. 3 tiny hearts, and one of them was fighting a battle for survival. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out every sound except Noah's trembling voice, echoing again and again. Asterisk, one of the baby's hearts is struggling. She clutched Silas's arm with both hands, her nails digging into his sleeve, her grip desperate and frantic. Her breathing turned shallow, fast, desperate. She wasn't just scared. She was unraveling, the threads of her sanity slowly coming undone. Tell me exactly what you saw in that report, Silas demanded, his voice sharp with controlled panic. Noah swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. The last ultrasound from 2 days ago. Baby B's heartbeat was irregular. The doctor noted it but wanted to run more tests. Declan got the report first and he used it to manipulate me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ava shook her head violently, refusing to accept the reality of his words. No, that's impossible. I didn't miss any appointments. I would have known. I would have felt it. Hey, Silas whispered, gripping her shoulders, his gaze locking with hers. Look at me. Breathe. Just breathe. But she couldn't. All she could see was the image from her last appointment, the grainy black and white blur of the ultrasound screen. 3 tiny shapes swimming in the darkness. 3 flickers of life pulsing like distant stars. She had memorized every beat, every flutter, every hope contained within those images. And now one of them might be fading. Call Dr. Ali, Silas ordered, turning to his security team. Now, tell her we're coming to the hospital. Immediately, Noah stepped forward shakily, his face etched with anguish. Mr. Hawthorne, please let me help. I never meant for this to happen. Let me make it right. Silas didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. You will make it right by getting out of my home and praying Ava never sees your face again. Noah lowered his head, shame swallowing him whole, and stepped backward into the elevator. The doors slid shut with a soft hiss, sealing his fate like a final, irrevocable sentence. Ava's legs buckled again, the world threatening to spin out of control. Silas caught her, lifting her effortlessly into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. We're going, he murmured against her hair, his voice a low rumble of reassurance. We're going to the hospital right now. The drive to St. Aurora Hospital felt endless, each second stretching into an eternity. Rain smeared the windshield, blurring the city lights into distorted halos. Ava kept one hand on her stomach the entire time, whispering through her tears, "Hang on, baby, please, just hang on." Silas drove like a man possessed, his jaw clenched tight, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. He kept glancing at her, his heart breaking at every sob, every tremble of her lip. He had seen her hurt before, seen her endure fear, exhaustion, humiliation, but never this. Never a terror that came from within her, threatening the very souls growing beneath her ribs. When they reached the hospital, nurses rushed them inside, their faces etched with concern. Silas carried Ava through the doors, ignoring the cameras flashing outside, the reporters already circling like vultures, drawn by Declan's stunt at the press event. Inside the dim ultrasound room, Ava lay on the exam table, the paper gown crinkling beneath her palms. Her breath hitched in her throat as the cold gel touched her skin, sending a shiver through her body. The machine hummed to life, filling the silence with its sterile mechanical rhythm. Silas held her hand tightly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a silent gesture of comfort and support. Dr. Ali, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a steady demeanor, moved the probe across Ava's belly with practiced calm. But Ava could see the tension in her jaw, the subtle crease of worry between her brows. "Please," Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. "Tell me they're okay. Please just tell me they're okay." "Let me take a closer look," the doctor murmured, her voice soothing and professional. Seconds passed like years, each one agonizingly slow. Finally, she spoke, her voice betraying nothing of what she saw on the screen. "Baby A, very strong heartbeat. Baby C, steady and rhythmic." She paused, her eyes fixed on the monitor. Silas's grip on Ava's hand tightened, his knuckles turning white. "And baby B?" Ava choked out, her voice laced with dread. The screen flickered, the image shifting and wavering. A faint, uneven flutter appeared, a tiny spark of life struggling to hold on. Dr. Ali exhaled slowly, her gaze unwavering. "Baby B's heartbeat is irregular, but present. It's weaker than it should be. We need to monitor closely and start immediate intervention." Ava burst into tears, a torrent of relief, fear, and exhaustion colliding within her. Silas pressed his forehead to hers, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "They're still fighting," he whispered. "All three of them are still fighting. But what caused it?" Ava cried, her voice raw with emotion. "Did I do something wrong? Was it the stress? Was it Declan?" "No," Dr. Ali said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "This isn't your fault, Ava. This can happen in high-risk multiples. What matters is that you came in now." She placed a gentle hand on Ava's arm, her touch reassuring. "But Ava, you need to understand. From this moment on, you cannot go home. You need full medical supervision, and any elevated stress could worsen the baby's condition." Ava nodded weakly, her mind reeling from the weight of the doctor's words. Silas turned to the doctor, his voice brooking no argument. "She stays. Private room, full security, whatever equipment she needs. I want the best care possible." But the doctor hesitated, her expression troubled. "There's something else," she said softly, her gaze shifting between Ava and Silas. "Stress alone isn't the issue." Silas frowned, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Then what is it?" Dr. Ali looked at Ava, then at Silas, her expression grave. "Someone accessed Ava's digital medical chart. Someone outside our system." Ava's blood ran cold, the revelation sending a chill down her spine. Silas's face darkened, his jaw clenching with barely suppressed rage. "Declan," he said, the name dripping with venom. The doctor nodded grimly, confirming his suspicions. "And whoever accessed it tried to request unauthorized updates. Changes to her records." Ava clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming, the terror building within her. Declan wasn't just stalking her. He was trying to rewrite her medical reality, to twist the truth to fit his own twisted narrative. Silas closed his eyes once, slowly, as if holding back an explosion of fury. Then he opened them, his voice deadly calm, a chilling contrast to the storm raging within him. "This ends tonight." But Ava didn't know that ending Declan's reign of terror was going to demand one more devastating twist, one that would push her to the very edge of losing everything she held dear. The private room Ava was moved into looked more like a boutique hotel suite than a sterile hospital space. Soft lighting, a plush reclining bed, and a panoramic view overlooking Central Park were designed to soothe her frayed nerves. But no amount of calming decor could truly quell the terror gnawing inside her. Machines beeped steadily beside her, their rhythmic pulses a constant reminder of the fragile lives she carried. And 4 dripped slowly into her arm, delivering a cocktail of fluids and medications designed to keep her stable. 2 fetal monitors blinked incessantly, displaying 3 fragile rhythms on glowing screens. Baby A, Baby B, Baby C. Ava stared at those flickers of light as if her own life depended on each and every beat. Silas stood near the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and deadly calm as he spoke with his head of corporate security. Find out exactly when the breach happened and trace every digital fingerprint. I want a full timeline of Declan's activity. Ava could tell by the rigid line of his shoulders, the clenching of his jaw, that he was barely holding himself together, fighting to contain the storm of fury within him. When he finally hung up, he walked toward her, trying his best to soften his expression, to mask the worry that clouded his eyes. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently, his voice filled with concern. She forced a small, weak smile, but the truth was evident in her eyes. "Like I'm lying inside a glass box, waiting to crack." Silas sat on the edge of her bed, gently brushing stray strands of hair from her forehead, his touch tender and reassuring. "You're not going to crack, Ava. Not while I'm here." A knock sounded at the door, interrupting the moment. Deborah Collins entered, her presence a mixture of authority and compassion. She closed the door behind her, set her briefcase on the table, and took a seat, her expression serious. "We have a problem," she said immediately, cutting straight to the chase. Ava braced herself, steeling herself for another blow. Another breach? More of Declan's machinations? "Worse," Deborah replied, her voice grim. "Declan filed an emergency court petition tonight. He's claiming you're psychologically unfit to carry the pregnancy safely." Ava's mouth fell open, her mind struggling to process the sheer audacity of his actions. "What? How could he even do that?" "He forged medical documents," Deborah said calmly, her voice devoid of emotion. "Ones that Noah must have helped provide." Silas cursed under his breath, his anger simmering just below the surface. Deborah continued, unfazed. "He's using the stress episode at the gala, plus the recent medical complications, to argue that the babies are at risk under your care. He's requesting temporary medical conservatorship." Ava felt the room spin, the walls closing in around her. "Conservatorship? That's insane. He wants legal control over my pregnancy?" Deborah nodded gravely, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and resolve. "Yes, which would give him access to every medical decision and the right to override yours." Ava clutched her stomach instinctively, protective panic rising like a tidal wave. He can't take my babies. He can't control me again." Silas stood abruptly, his voice a low growl of steel. "He won't. Not ever again." Deborah held up a hand, silencing him. "We can fight it and we will, but that's not the worst part." She slid a document across the table, her expression grim. "Declan has convinced the court to send a wellness evaluator here tonight." Ava's blood ran cold, her breath catching in her throat. No, I can't. I can't handle something like that right now. If they force me to talk, if I panic, my stress could harm the babies." "That's exactly what he's counting on." "That's what he's counting on," Deborah said quietly, her voice filled with quiet fury. Silas paced the room like a caged lion, his movements restless and agitated. "He wants to push her into a breakdown so the evaluator files against her. He's trying to break her." Ava felt tears burn behind her eyes, the weight of Declan's malice crushing her. Why is he doing this? Why go to such lengths? What does he even want? Silas turned to her, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Because losing control of you wasn't enough. He wants to destroy you, Ava. He wants to erase you from existence." Another knock came at the door, a softer one, more hesitant than before. A security officer poked his head inside, his expression uneasy. "Mr. Hawthorne, Miss Collins, the evaluator is here." He paused, glancing nervously at Ava. "And sir, there's something else." Silas stiffened, his body tensing. "What is it?" The guard looked even more uncomfortable. "Declan Ward is in the lobby. He's demanding to be allowed up," the guard continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's shouting to reporters that you're hiding Ava and that she's a danger to herself and the pregnancy." Ava's heart slammed against her ribs, the beat erratic and painful. Silas moved toward the door, his fists clenching at his sides, but Deborah blocked his path, her expression implacable. "Don't," she warned, her voice low and urgent. He wants you to confront him. It strengthens his narrative. It makes him look like the concerned protector and you look like the controlling abuser. Ava shook her head violently, panic clawing at her throat, threatening to overwhelm her. I can't see him, Silas. If he walks in here, I'll break. And if I break, the babies. He rushed to her side, taking both her hands in his, grounding her with his touch. You won't break, he whispered, his voice fierce with determination. You're stronger than he ever imagined. Her voice cracked, filled with fear and exhaustion. But I'm scared, Silas. I'm so scared. Silas leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers, his eyes locking with hers, transmitting a silent promise of protection and unwavering support. Then be scared, Ava. It's okay to be scared. I'll carry the rest. I'll carry the fear for both of us. Before she could answer, the door opened again, pushing past the hesitant guard. A woman in a gray suit stepped inside, her presence calm and authoritative. The evaluator. Her expression was neutral, professional, until she looked at Ava. Then her eyes softened, a flicker of something akin to recognition in their depths. Ava Reynolds, she said gently, her voice soothing and kind. I'm here to help. Ava blinked, her mind reeling, trying to make sense of the situation. The woman lowered her voice, her tone confidential. My sister was one of your NICU patients once. Years ago, you saved her baby's life. You were her nurse. Ava gasped, the revelation taking her by surprise. Silas looked stunned, his expression a mixture of confusion and relief. Deborah whispered, her voice filled with hope. This changes everything. This could be the turning point. But outside the room, Declan was shouting louder, angrier, his voice laced with desperation. And the evaluator's next words hinted at a truth that could shake everything to its very core. I know what men like Declan Ward are capable of. Ava's pulse stumbled, fear warring with a fragile spark of hope. For the first time that night, the fear inside her shifted, not into despair, but into a flicker of defiance, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't entirely alone in this fight. For the first time since the nightmare began, Ava felt the air inside her chest shift, just slightly, just enough for a fragile breath, a tiny spark of hope to ignite within the darkness. The evaluator, a woman with calm eyes and a steady posture, stepped closer and gently closed the door behind her, sealing out the echoes of Declan's rage in the hallway. My name is Mia Hargrove, she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet strength. I specialize in high-risk maternal wellness evaluations, but I'm not here because of Declan. I'm here because the court appointed me independently. He doesn't control me. Ava swallowed hard, her mind struggling to process the information. But he said he filed a petition. I thought he filed it. Mia confirmed, her expression unwavering. He did file one, and I read it on my way here. It was alarming, Ava. Not because of you. Her eyes darkened, her voice taking on an edge. Because of him and the lies it contained. Silas stood beside the bed, arms crossed tightly, every muscle coiled with suspicion. What exactly did he tell the court? What kind of lies did he spread? Mia pulled a small folder from her bag, her movements deliberate and controlled. He claims Ava is emotionally unstable, displaying erratic behavior, suffering delusions regarding the pregnancy, and refusing medical care. He submitted forged medical notes to support his claims. Ava felt disgust rise in her throat, the bile bitter and burning. He's lying. Every single word of it is a lie. I know, Mia said firmly, her voice unwavering. Ava blinked, searching her eyes for any sign of doubt. You do? Mia nodded, taking a slow, steadying breath as if preparing herself to reveal something heavy and significant. My sister Caroline gave birth 8 years ago. Severe complications. Premature baby. Nick, you stayed. You were her nurse. She smiled gently, a warmth spreading through her features. Ava's eyes widened, recognition dawning. I remember a Caroline, and a little Nick. You stayed past your shift, Mia continued, her voice thick with emotion. You read to her baby at night. You spent hours helping my sister stay calm when she thought she was losing him. You held her hand and gave her hope when she was on the verge of despair. Her voice cracked slightly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You saved my nephew's life, Ava. You gave my sister the strength to keep fighting. Silas exhaled a long, relieved breath, the tension visibly leaving his body. Deborah Collins stopped writing in her legal pad, her gaze softening, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Ava felt tears sting her eyes, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. I didn't know. I don't always remember the families so specifically. You wouldn't have, Mia said, sitting beside the bed, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm. But I never forgot your face, your kindness, or the way you treated my sister and her baby. So when I saw your name on the emergency petition, I didn't see a woman in crisis. I saw a woman who once held my family together. Ava's voice trembled, her heart overflowing with emotion. And you believe me? Even after everything Declan said, everything he's done? Mia's expression hardened, her eyes flashing with a steely resolve. Declan Ward is exactly the kind of man who weaponizes fear and paperwork, who twists the truth to serve his own twisted purposes. I've evaluated dozens of cases involving abusers like him. His file reeks of coercion and manipulation. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Ava, I'm here to protect your rights, not take them away. I'm here to ensure your safety and well-being, and the well-being of your babies. Ava burst into tears, quiet, exhausted tears that shook her entire chest. Silas took her hand immediately, his grip strong and reassuring. You're safe, Ava? He whispered, his voice filled with love and protection. You're safe with me. But Mia wasn't finished, her words still hanging in the air. There's something else, she said, turning to Deborah, her expression grave. Declan didn't just forge records. He tried to manipulate the court system by claiming imminent danger to the fetuses. He requested emergency intervention to gain temporary control over your medical care. Deborah cursed under her breath, her voice laced with fury. He's trying to force a precedent. If a judge grants that Ava loses all autonomy, every decision regarding her pregnancy would be his to make. Silas's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with anger. Over my dead body. Mia raised a calming hand, her expression unwavering. That won't happen because I've already submitted my initial evaluation to the court, based on factual data. Ava froze, her mind reeling from the implications of her words. Already? But you just arrived. How could you have done a full evaluation so quickly? I've been reviewing your actual medical files all day. The real ones, not the forgeries Declan created. And I documented Declan's attempts to alter them, the exact times and methods he used. Mia said, the court has copies now, and so does the ethics board for attorneys. Silas's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across his face. So the court will see his petition as malicious, an attempt to manipulate the system for personal gain. Mia finished, her voice filled with satisfaction. It will weaken him severely, and show him as someone with zero regard for ethics. Ava let out a shaky breath, her body sagging with relief. She felt like she'd been holding her breath for months, drowning in fear and uncertainty. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much, Mia. Mia gave her a soft smile, her eyes filled with empathy. You deserve peace, Ava. And you're not as alone as he wants you to believe. There are people who care about you, people who see through his lies and manipulation. You have allies. Before anyone could respond, a loud commotion erupted outside the door. The sounds of voices clashing, security shouting, and reporters pushing boundaries filling the hallway. Silas instantly moved closer to Ava, his protective instinct flaring to life. What now? What's going on? A guard burst inside, his face pale with alarm. Sir, Mr. Ward is refusing to leave the premises. He's demanding access to Ava's room, and he's threatening to sue if you don't let him see her. Ava's heart lurched in terror, her body trembling uncontrollably. Deborah stood swiftly, her eyes blazing with fury. "This ends tonight," Deborah barked. "Mia, stay with Ava. Silas, come with me. We'll handle Declan." But Mia placed a hand over Ava's trembling ones, her touch gentle and reassuring. Her voice dropped to a whisper, her eyes locking with Ava's. "Ava, you need to hear this before they leave. Declan didn't just come to harass you tonight. The petition and demonstration were a start." Mia hesitated, her expression troubled, then said the words that made Ava's blood turn to ice. "He's petitioning for an emergency order that would force you into a psychiatric evaluation under custody." Ava gasped, clutching her stomach, the world tilting precariously on its axis. Silas froze mid-step, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "He wants to institutionalize you." "Ava?" Mia whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "Immediately. The petition is on the judge's desk right now." Ava's pulse exploded into panic, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Fear, sharp, suffocating and primal, flooded her entire being, threatening to drown her. But Mia tightened her grip on Ava's hand, her gaze unwavering. "Listen to me," she said urgently, her voice filled with quiet strength. "He plans to break you, Ava. He wants to take away your agency, strip you of your freedom, and leave you shattered beyond repair." Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a barely audible whisper. "But he has no idea how close he is to destroying himself. He's overplaying his hand, and that's going to be his downfall." Ava felt as if the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees, the air suddenly thick with tension and unspoken dread. Institutionalized. The word echoed in her head like a scream trapped underwater, a chilling premonition of what Declan was capable of. Declan wasn't just trying to control her, to manipulate her into submission. He was trying to erase her, to strip her of her identity, to steal her babies, and to break her so completely that she could never rise again. Silas stopped halfway to the door, his face changed, no longer just worried or angry. Something colder, sharper, far more dangerous settled behind his eyes, a look that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. "No one," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble of pure, unadulterated rage. "No one will ever put Ava in a psychiatric facility. Not while I'm alive and not while I have breath in my body." Mia squeezed Ava's hand, grounding her, pulling her back from the brink of despair. "Listen to me, Ava," she said softly, her voice filled with urgency. "Declan is desperate. Men like him escalate right before they fall apart. They become reckless, make mistakes, and expose themselves. And that's exactly what's happening right now. He's unraveling, and he's about to make his final, fatal mistake." Ava tried to steady her breathing, but her chest was tight, her lungs constricted with fear. Every inhale was painful, every exhale a struggle. "I feel like he's everywhere, like he knows every move we make. I don't understand how he can have this much reach." Silas turned toward her, his expression fierce and determined. "Not anymore. It ends here, Ava. With him." He glanced at the guard, his voice commanding. "Bring Security Chief Danvers here immediately, and call Detective Ruiz from the NYPD. Tell her the situation has escalated, and that we need her assistance." Deborah crossed her arms, her eyes blazing with a righteous fury. "We have enough on him already to put him away for a long time, but I want airtight charges. I want to ensure that he never sees the light of day again. If he's trying to force psychiatric custody, that means he forged signatures or bribed someone. We need to find out who he's working with." Mia nodded, her expression grim. "Falsifying mental health claims for personal gain is a felony. He thinks he's untouchable, that his wealth and power will protect him." Outside, Declan continued shouting, demanding, threatening, his voice laced with a venomous charisma that he had honed over years of manipulating judges, investors, and anyone who stood in his way. Ava heard his voice echo in the hall, growing louder and more insistent. "She's unstable. She needs intervention. I'm trying to save her and the babies, but they won't let me help. They're hiding her." and something bad is going to happen. A nurse walked by, her face pale with fear, and flinched at the sound of his voice. Ava pressed her hands to her stomach, whispering to her babies. Her voice filled with love and protectiveness. I'm here. I'm fighting for you. Just hold on. Please just hold on. Then, something unexpected happened. A glimmer of hope in the midst of the darkness. Security Chief Danvers entered the room, his expression grim and determined. He nodded respectfully at Ava before turning to Silas, his voice low and serious. We found something, Mr. Hawthorne, in Mr. Ward's possession. Silas stiffened, his body tensing. What is it? What did you find? Danvers held up a small plastic evidence pouch, carefully sealed. Inside it was a USB drive, its surface gleaming under the light. Ava felt her heart stutter, her breath catching in her throat. What's on it? What's on that drive? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The chief hesitated, his expression troubled. Encrypted medical files, Ms. Reynolds. Not just yours. We also found the login credentials for Dr. O'Malley's account, and evidence that he attempted to alter fetal reports. Ava's breath hitched, her world tilting precariously. He tried to change my baby's medical records again? After everything else, he still tried to hurt them. The chief nodded grimly, his jaw clenched. Worse, ma'am. He tried to create a false report suggesting you refused treatment that endangered baby B, and the false report was to be submitted to the court. Ava covered her mouth, her entire body shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. Silas swore under his breath, a sound Ava had never heard from him before, a raw, guttural expression of pure, unadulterated fury. Deborah stepped forward, her eyes blazing. This is grounds for immediate restraining orders, criminal charges, attempted interference with medical care, fraud, and a whole host of other violations. He's digging his own grave. But the chief wasn't done, his expression still troubled. And there's something else, he added, his voice grave. A recorded phone call between Mr. Ward and Noah Ellis, the former Hawthorne employee. Ava gasped, her mind reeling. What did he say to Noah? What did he make him do? Silas's eyes narrowed, his body tensing. Play it. Let's hear what kind of depravity Declan is capable of. The chief connected his phone to the room's audio system, and Declan's voice filled the air, slick with malice and manipulation. You do exactly what I say, Noah, or your sister loses her job. You hear me? I'll bury her so deep she'll never see the light of day again. And that nurse, that pathetic ex-wife of mine. I'll make sure no one believes a word she says. I'll have her declared unfit before the week is over, and I'll take those babies away from her. Ava's tears slipped silently down her cheeks, her heart aching with a mixture of fear and despair. Deborah's face darkened, her expression grim. He extorted Noah, threatened his family to get him to do his bidding. That gives us more leverage than I ever hoped for. He's completely screwed himself. But Mia leaned forward, her voice icy calm, her eyes fixed on Ava. And that's not all. Someone leaked Declan's petition to the court ethics board. They are now reviewing his conduct for malicious filing and abuse of the legal system. Ava blinked through her tears, her mind struggling to comprehend the ever-shifting landscape of the situation. Someone leaked it? Who could have done that? Mia gave a small, secretive smile, a hint of mischief in her eyes. Let's just say you're not the only one he underestimated, Ava. Some of his own contacts are turning on him, realizing that he's become a liability. Silas exhaled a controlled, dangerous sound. His eyes narrowed and focused. He's unraveling, losing his grip on everything he thought he controlled. Danvers nodded, his expression grim. And his presence downstairs is making it worse. The reporters are documenting everything. Every shout, every threat, every lie he utters. Mia squeezed Ava's hand again, her touch grounding and reassuring. This is the moment men like Declan slip, when they become reckless and desperate, when they lose sight of the consequences of their actions. And they slip big. But before anyone could respond, a nurse rushed into the room, her face pale with alarm, her voice trembling with urgency. "Mr. Hawthorne, you need to see this. It's Ms. Reynolds' monitor for fetal heartbeat and it looks like something bad is happening." Silas tensed, his body going rigid. "What's wrong? What's happening?" She pointed to the monitor displaying Ava's fetal heartbeats. Baby B's line flickered erratically, weak, and rapidly failing. Ava's world narrowed to a pinpoint, the rest of the room fading into a blurry haze. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking with terror. "No, no, please. Not now. Not like this." Silas moved instantly to her side, his hands shaking as he pressed the call button for emergency assistance, his voice a desperate plea. "Doctor, we need help in here now. Something's happening to one of the babies." As alarms began to sound, shrill and insistent, and Ava realized with horrifying clarity that Declan wasn't just trying to break her mind. He was pushing her body to its absolute limit, testing her strength beyond what she thought was possible. And now, one of her babies was paying the price. The alarm was shrill, high-pitched, piercing, and relentless. It sliced through the sterile silence of the hospital room like a jagged blade, tearing through the fragile sense of calm they had managed to create. Ava's breath hitched in her throat, caught between a sob and a scream, as the fetal monitor for Baby B pulsed red, the flashing light a horrifying beacon. Its once steady, rhythmic flicker, a sign of life and hope, was now dipping sharply, erratic and irregular, like a flame struggling against a relentless wind, threatening to be extinguished. "Silas?" she whispered, her voice cracking with terror, barely audible above the din of the alarm. "The heartbeat. It's dropping. Something's wrong." Silas was already at her side, his hands shaking as he pressed the call button for emergency assistance, his face a mask of fear and determination. "Doctor, we need help in here now. One of the babies is in distress." His voice boomed with a mixture of fear and authority that carried down the hallway, summoning help with its urgency. Two nurses rushed into the room, their faces etched with concern, their movements swift and purposeful. "Ava, try to stay calm," one urged gently, her voice soothing but firm, as she adjusted the sensors on her stomach, trying to get a better reading. "Let's reposition you. Sometimes that helps with fetal distress." They shifted her gently to her left side, then to her right, trying to find a position that would ease the pressure on the struggling baby. The monitor stuttered, the line flickering momentarily, but it didn't stabilize. The erratic pattern persisted, a terrifying testament to the baby's distress. Ava felt cold sweat prickle beneath her hairline, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, each beat a frantic reminder of the precious lives hanging in the balance. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "Please don't let anything happen to them. You can't lose them." Silas bent over her, brushing tears from her cheeks with trembling fingers, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and desperation. "Ava, listen to me. You're not alone. They're going to take care of you and they're going to take care of the babies. I'm right here with you. I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this." Dr. O'Malley entered the room, her face calm but clearly alarmed, her quick strides filling the space with a sense of urgency. "Talk to me," she said as she reached the monitor, her voice professional and focused. "How long has the deceleration been happening? When did you first notice the change in the fetal heartbeat?" "Approximately 30 seconds, a nurse replied, her voice precise and efficient. "The deceleration has been ongoing and doesn't show signs of resolving." The doctor frowned, her gaze fixed on the monitor, her mind racing through possible causes and interventions. "We need to act now. Ava, your stress levels are spiking. Your blood pressure is elevated. Baby B is responding to that stress. We need to stabilize you both." Ava felt a sob claw its way. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs, each throb a frantic drumbeat echoing the perilous dance of Baby B's monitor. The green line flickered erratically, a visual testament to the razor's edge between hope and despair. She fought to regulate her breathing, acutely aware that her emotional state was a lifeline for her unborn children. Dr. Ali, her face etched with exhaustion, adjusted her glasses, a flicker of relief softening the harsh lines around her mouth as Baby B's monitor showed a slight uptick. "Good," she murmured. "That's good. But Ava, you need rest. Absolute rest, absolute calm. What stabilizes you stabilizes them." Ava managed a shaky nod, the moment as fragile as spun glass. She felt Silas's gentle kiss on her forehead, a silent promise of unwavering support. "I'm not leaving your side," he vowed, his voice a low rumble against her skin. Not for a second, but the fragile peace shattered with Danvers's sudden reappearance at the door, his urgency palpable. "Mr. Hawthorne," he whispered, his voice laced with dread. "Declan isn't in the LA lobby anymore." Silas's blood turned to glacial ice in his veins. "Where is he?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Danvers swallowed hard, the weight of the unknown heavy on his face. "We're not sure. He's somewhere on this floor." He slipped past a gaggle of reporters, his words a chilling pronouncement. Ava's world tilted on its axis. She clutched at Silas's arm, her voice barely a whisper, thick with fear. "He's coming for me." Silas turned, his eyes no longer reflecting fear, only a cold, implacable fury, the promise of a brutal reckoning etched onto his features. If Declan Ward dared to encroach, to trespass any further, it would be the final, fatal error of his miserable existence. The moment Danvers uttered the words, "He's somewhere on this floor," every survival instinct Ava possessed roared to life. Her pulse surged, a frantic rhythm that sent the fetal monitors into a chaotic frenzy. Desperate to regain control, she forced herself to breathe, terrified of triggering another agonizing dip in Baby B's delicate heartbeat. Silas reacted instantly, his body a shield positioning himself between Ava and the doorway, as if expecting Declan to burst through at any second. "Danvers, lock down this entire wing," he barked, his voice laced with steel. "No one enters without clearance from me or Dr. Ali." Danvers nodded sharply, already barking orders into his radio, his voice echoing down the hallway as he mobilized hospital security. Mia stepped closer to Ava, her hand a reassuring weight on her arm. "Remember what the doctor said. Your safety, your calm, that's paramount. Let us handle him." Ava nodded, her body trembling uncontrollably. "He won't stop," she whispered, her voice thick with a despairing certainty. "Not until he gets what he wants." Silas turned back to her, his eyes burning with a possessive ferocity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Then he's about to learn he picked the wrong people to terrorize." Before Ava could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway, a cacophony of hurried footsteps, raised voices, and the sharp, authoritative commands of security personnel. Silas stiffened, his senses on high alert, every muscle coiled with tension. A nurse rushed into the room, her face pale and breathless. "He's on the east end of the ward. He's trying to open patient doors." Ava's stomach lurched. "He's trying to get into rooms?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The nurse nodded shakily, her eyes wide with fear. "He's shouting your name and threatening staff." Silas's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles bone-white. "I'm going out there." Ava grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, Silas, please. If he provokes you, he'll twist it. He'll say you attacked him, that you're dangerous. He wants you angry. He needs you angry." Her voice broke, choked with terror. Silas softened, his gaze shifting from fury to tenderness. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I won't give him what he wants. I'll give him what he deserves." Mia stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Wait, let me go first." Both Ava and Silas stared at her, surprised. Mia explained, "Declan's tactic is psychological escalation. He's expecting a confrontation with someone he can bait, Silas especially. But he doesn't expect someone like me. Someone calm. Someone he can't intimidate." Ava shook her head, her fear overriding logic. "He's dangerous." Mia held up a small, official-looking badge, showcasing her credentials as a court-appointed evaluator. "And I'm not afraid of men who hide behind paperwork and rage." With that, She slipped out of the room before either of them could voice their objections. Silas hovered near the door, straining to listen, ready to explode into action at the slightest sign of danger. Ava clutched at his sleeve, her silent prayers a desperate plea for protection. Moments later, Mia's voice, calm, steady, and authoritative, drifted down the hall. "Mr. Ward, this behavior is entirely inappropriate. You need to stop." Declan's reply was like venom, a raw, guttural snarl. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the court-appointed evaluator," she stated, her voice unwavering. "And your actions tonight are being documented." A long, tense silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken threats. Then, Declan's voice erupted again, this time unhinged, bordering on hysterical. "Don't lecture me. She's my wife. She's sick. She's dangerous. She's—" Mia cut him off sharply, her voice leaving no room for argument. "What I see is a man spiraling out of control. A man who is endangering staff, endangering patients, and endangering the woman he claims to love. This ends now." Silas stepped into the hallway, just far enough to assess the situation, but staying close enough to Ava to honor her desperate plea. Declan stood at the far end of the corridor, his hair wild, his tie askew, his eyes bloodshot and wild with fury. Security personnel surrounded him, poised to intervene. He spotted Silas and his face twisted with rage. "You think you can take everything from me? My wife, my future, my life?" He jabbed a trembling finger towards Ava's door. "She belongs with me, not with you." Silas didn't flinch, his expression unchanging. "Ava doesn't belong to anyone." Declan lunged forward, fueled by desperation and rage. Security tackled him instantly, a flurry of limbs and muffled shouts. He thrashed wildly, screaming, "Ava! Ava! He's lying to you. I can fix everything. Just come with me." Ava sobbed, burying her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the force of his volatile emotions. Silas rushed back to her side, pulling her close, his arms a protective barrier against the chaos. "He won't touch you," he vowed, his voice a low growl. "He won't even breathe near you again." Down the hall, security finally subdued Declan, snapping handcuffs around his wrists as he continued to kick and spit like a cornered animal. Mia returned, breathless but composed. "He's being escorted out of the hospital and taken into custody for trespassing, harassment, and attempted interference with medical care." Ava let out a sound, a broken, relieved, exhausted sound. "It's over." Mia exchanged a knowing glance with Silas. "Not yet," she said softly, "but this is the beginning of the end." Ava looked at Silas, her eyes a mixture of fear and a fragile hope. "Then I'll hold on," she whispered, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "For them." Silas kissed her knuckles gently, his gaze unwavering. "And I'll destroy anyone who tries to take them from you." Outside, as Declan was dragged away, screaming her name, Ava realized something profoundly simple. The next move wasn't his. It was hers. The hospital felt eerily quiet after Declan's dramatic exit. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, trembling quiet that descends after an earthquake, when everyone waits, bracing themselves for the aftershocks. Ava lay back against her pillows, utterly drained, her hand resting protectively over the 3 small lives within her. The monitor beside her steadied slightly, baby B's heartbeat still fragile, but holding its own. Silas sat in the chair beside her bed, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the floor, his shoulders tense as if wrestling with some inner demon too dark to voice aloud. Ava touched his hand softly, her touch a silent invitation. "Silas, talk to me." He lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed, not from tears, but from a sleepless, simmering fury. "Ava, you could have died tonight. Our babies, they could have." He broke off, his jaw clenched tight, his muscles rigid. "I should have stopped him sooner. I should have seen this coming." Ava shook her head, her voice firm. "You protected me. You saved us. Before Silas could respond, Deborah strode into the room, tablet in hand, her heels clicking against the sterile floor like sharp punctuation marks. Mia followed close behind, her expression grim. We need to update you both, Deborah said, her voice unusually sharp and devoid of its usual warmth. This is bigger than we thought. Silas straightened in his chair, his body tensing. What now? Deborah tapped the screen of her tablet, her face grim. Declan didn't just breach your medical data or stalk Ava. He bribed a clerk in the courthouse to fast-track his petition. Ava felt a chill crawl across her skin, a creeping sense of dread. Bribed? How much? Enough, Deborah answered grimly. But money isn't the issue anymore, it's leverage. The clerk was drowning in debt. Declan preyed on desperation. Mia folded her arms, her gaze unwavering. This confirms everything we suspected. Coercion, fraud, malicious intent. The ethics board is already moving. And now the district attorney wants statements. Silas leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. How strong is our case? Deborah allowed herself a slow, razor-sharp smile. Ironclad. Declan left fingerprints on every crime he committed. He was sloppy because he was desperate. And men who spiral like he did always make the same fatal mistake. She raised a brow, her expression knowing. They underestimate the woman they're obsessed with. Ava swallowed hard, her throat tight. What happens now? Deborah sat on the edge of the bed, her voice reassuring. The DA is preparing multiple charges. Attempted medical fraud, harassment and stalking, extortion of a medical aid, attempted interference in fetal medical care, trespassing in a secured hospital wing, possibly more as evidence is processed. Ava covered her mouth, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of it all. He won't get out of this, will he? No. Deborah's tone was final, leaving no room for doubt. Mia added, and your statement at the press conference earlier, it actually helped tremendously. Proved you were coherent, strong, and credible. The court will take that into account. Ava felt a strange warmth flood her chest, a fragile sense of hope beginning to bloom. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was being believed. Silas reached for her hand, his touch a grounding presence. I told you he was done the moment he stepped foot in this hospital. Just then, Danvers reappeared at the door, his expression noticeably different this time. He looked relieved, almost triumphant. Mr. Hawthorne, he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. You'll want to see this. He held up his phone, displaying a live stream from the hospital lobby. Reporters swarmed near the entrance as police officers escorted Declan out in handcuffs, his hair disheveled, his face twisted in manic fury. Flashing cameras illuminated the scene like a strobe light. A reporter shouted, Mr. Ward, any comment on your arrest? Declan screamed, his voice raw with desperation. She did this to me. She's mine. That woman ruined me. Police shoved him into the back of a squad car, the sound of the crowd echoing through the speakers. Ava's hand flew to her chest, her heart pounding in her ears. She hadn't expected to feel this way, shaken and emotional, yet also lighter, as if the weight he'd pressed on her for years had finally begun to crack. Silas exhaled slowly, tension visibly easing from his shoulders. It's over. But Mia raised a hand gently, her expression cautious. Tonight was a victory, but the real battle is making sure he stays away forever. Ava nodded, her gaze determined. And I'll do whatever it takes. Deborah softened her voice, offering a comforting smile. You already did the hardest part, Ava. You spoke out. You fought back. And now the law will handle the rest. Ava turned to Silas, tears filling her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something else entirely, something new and unfamiliar. Silas, we're safe, right? He took her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reassuring, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, As long as I breathe, you and our children will always be safe. For the first time in years, Ava believed it. Declan was falling and she was finally rising. The next 72 hours inside St. Aurora Hospital felt like an eternity compressed into a heartbeat. Declan's arrest had erected a protective barrier around Ava's world. There were no more shouts echoing in the hallways, no more veiled threats, no more menacing shadows lurking outside her door. But even with him physically removed, her nerves remained raw, stretched thin by months of relentless terror and the fragile promise of new life fluttering within her. Baby B's heartbeat continued to waver, showing signs of improvement, but still alarmingly delicate. Nurses checked on her every hour, their faces etched with concern. Dr. Ali meticulously adjusted her medication, ordered a new series of scans, and spent long stretches sitting by Ava's side, patiently explaining every chart and test result. Through it all, Silas remained her constant anchor. He slept in the uncomfortable reclining chair beside her bed, sometimes with his head resting gently by her hip, sometimes with his hand wrapped tightly around hers, as if afraid she might vanish. When she woke screaming from a nightmarish dream, he was there, offering comfort and reassurance. When she cried silently into her pillow, overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion, he was there, offering a steady presence. And when the babies kicked, a small miracle of life, he grinned like a man witnessing the dawn of a new world. On the third morning, soft winter sunlight streamed into the room, casting a warm glow across Ava's face. She blinked awake, her eyes fluttering open to find Silas studying her, his elbows resting on the mattress, his expression a mixture of tenderness and aching vulnerability. "Morning," he whispered, his voice husky with sleep. Ava's throat tightened with emotion. "You should rest. You haven't slept more than an hour at a stretch." "I rest when you rest," he murmured, his gaze unwavering. She reached up and brushed her fingers along his jaw, her touch light and tentative. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried a weight of 1,000 unspoken words. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes for a moment, savoring the connection. A gentle knock interrupted their quiet moment. Deborah entered the room with a small, genuine smile, followed closely by Mia. "We have news," Deborah announced. Ava braced herself, her heart pounding in her chest. "Good or bad?" "Good," Mia answered, her voice filled with satisfaction. "Declan's petition has been thrown out permanently, and the judge issued a protective order so strict he won't even be allowed within 5 city blocks of this hospital or any future residents." Ava let out a long, trembling exhale, the tension finally beginning to dissipate. "Thank God," Deborah added, her voice filled with relief. "The DA is moving forward with charges. And with the evidence we have compiled, he won't see the outside of a courtroom for a very long time." Silas's hand tightened around Ava's, his grip firm and reassuring. "It's over. Really over." Ava closed her eyes as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. Tears not of fear this time, but of profound release, overwhelming relief, and the beginning of true healing. Mia sat down beside her on the bed, her expression serious. "Ava, I want you to hear something important. You're safe, you're strong, and you're not alone anymore." Ava nodded, her whole body trembling with the force of her emotions. "Thank you, all of you." When they left, the room settled into a comfortable quiet, bathed in the soft winter sunlight. Ava turned toward Silas, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Silas," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything that's happened, it feels so big, so overwhelming. I don't even know what comes next." Silas shifted closer, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead, his touch tender and reassuring. "I do." She frowned gently, confused by his certainty. "What do you mean?" He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a small, velvet box, navy blue in color, worn at the edges, as if he'd carried it for weeks. Ava covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes widening with surprise. Silas, noticing her shock, whispered with a gentle smile, "Don't panic, just listen." He opened the box to reveal a ring. It wasn't large or flashy, but its simplicity was stunning. A thin platinum band held a single, exquisitely cut diamond in a classic, timeless setting. It was elegant, understated, and perfect. "I'm not asking you to rush into anything," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. I'm not asking because of the babies or the chaos or anything that's happened. I'm asking because somewhere along the way, I realized I don't want a future where you're not beside me. His voice thickened with emotion, betraying the depth of his feelings. You changed me, Ava. You brought light back into my life. And I want to spend whatever years I have left showing you what real safety, real love, and real peace truly feels like. A sob escaped her lips, a release of pent-up emotion. Silas took her hand in his thumb trembling slightly over her knuckles. Ava Reynolds, will you marry me? Ava looked into his eyes, into their steady, unwavering depths, filled with a loyalty and love she once believed she didn't deserve. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Silas, I will. He kissed her then, his kiss gentle, careful, and full of the promise of a lifetime of love and commitment. The monitors hummed softly beside them, the 3 tiny heartbeats flickering on the screen like miniature stars in the vast darkness. And for the first time in her life, Ava felt not fear, but a flicker of genuine hope, a vision of a real future. As Silas held her close, Ava realized that this was her true victory, not revenge or mere survival, but finally having a home where love, not fear, reigned supreme. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Patricia Holloway began, her voice crisp and professional. My name is Patricia Holloway, Chief Operating Officer of Ashford Global Industries. I'll be brief. After 15 years of maintaining a deliberately low profile, our CEO has decided to adopt a more active, hands-on role in the day-to-day operations of the company. Starting next week, immediately following the charity gala, they will assume direct oversight of all executive divisions. A murmur, a low wave of speculation, rippled through the room. Marcus Thornton felt a sudden, unwelcome flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Direct oversight wasn't just a change in management style. It meant scrutiny. It meant their decisions, his decisions, would be watched more closely, dissected, and judged. What prompted this sudden shift? Richard Chun, the VP of Finance, voiced the question that hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken anxieties. Patricia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a practiced, professional expression, more a grimace than genuine amusement. That is the CEO's prerogative. What you need to know and understand clearly is this: there will be a complete and thorough review of all executive decisions made in the past 18 months. Personnel files, project approvals, expense accounts, everything. The CEO intends to ensure the company is operating at peak efficiency and, above all, adhering to the highest ethical standards. Marcus felt a bead of sweat trickle down the back of his neck, a cold premonition washing over him. 18 months ago, that's when he'd made those rather aggressive, perhaps overly ambitious, decisions regarding vendor contracts. Nothing strictly illegal, of course, but he had steered several lucrative deals toward companies where Sienna had connections, ensuring they both benefited handsomely from the resulting kickbacks. It was standard practice in his mind, a necessary component of effective networking and relationship. He cleared his throat subtly, building. But under the unwavering gaze of the CEO, that was a different matter entirely. I'm sure we all welcome increased transparency, Marcus said smoothly, forcing a note of confidence into his voice he didn't quite feel. Ashford Global's success speaks for itself. Wouldn't you agree? Indeed, it does, Patricia replied, and there was something in her tone, a subtle emphasis, that made Marcus's stomach clench tighter. The company's current valuation stands at $8.7 billion, with operations spanning 42 countries. The CEO is, understandably, very protective of that legacy and deeply invested in ensuring nothing tarnishes it. She stood, the 2 lawyers flanking her like silent sentinels. You will all receive detailed briefings before the gala. I strongly suggest you review your divisional reports carefully. The CEO has a remarkable eye for detail and a very long memory. Good afternoon, gentlemen. As they filed out of the conference room, a palpable tension hanging in the air, Marcus pulled Richard Chun aside. Have you ever actually met the CEO? Do you know anything about them? Richard shrugged. his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Only rumors, you know how it is. Very private. Never gives interviews. Inherited the company from family, I believe. Word is, they're ruthless when crossed but fair. If you're honest. Why the sudden interest? Just curious, Marcus said, forcing a casual tone. New job, wanting to make a good impression. That's all. But as he walked back to his opulent office, past the gleaming chrome and glass that screamed of Ashford Global's vast wealth, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The ground beneath his feet felt suddenly less solid, less secure. He found Sienna in his office, meticulously touching up her lipstick in the mirror. So what was the big meeting all about? You looked positively stricken when you came out. The CEO is coming out of hiding, Marcus said grimly, pouring himself a generous scotch from his desk bar, even though it was barely 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He needed something to steady his nerves. Taking a more hands-on approach. They're reviewing everything from the past 18 months. Sienna's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched. Everything? Including the Meridian contract you pushed through last year? The one where I happened to introduce you to the CEO's cousin? That was legitimate business networking, Sienna? Marcus said sharply, his voice edged with irritation. There's nothing inherently wrong with building relationships. But they both knew that the $50,000 consulting fee Sienna had received from Meridian Industries had come directly from the inflated markup Marcus had discreetly approved on their contract with Ashford Global. It was a murky gray area at best. I'm sure it's fine, Sienna said, but her voice had lost some of its usual confidence. The bright veneer of assurance now slightly cracked. We're both smart, we've been careful. And after the gala, after you propose, you'll be even more established. They're not going to touch a VP who's about to become a family man. Marcus nodded, trying desperately to believe her. The gala was in 5 days. He just needed to hold steady, keep everything under control until then. The night before the gala, Vivian Ashford Thornton, or rather just Vivian Ashford, sat in her newly furnished penthouse apartment, the soft glow of the city lights painting delicate patterns on the walls. Mozart played softly in the background, a soothing counterpoint to the sharp edges of the financial reports spread across her tablet. The apartment was located in the Pinnacle Tower, the most exclusive residential building in the city, but she'd deliberately chosen a modest 3-bedroom unit rather than the sprawling, ostentatious penthouse suite. Old habits died hard, she supposed. Everything is in place for tomorrow, Patricia Holloway said, settling into the sleek modern chair across from her. The executive team has been briefed, well, most of them. Your ex-husband and his fiancée remain blissfully unaware, as you requested. Vivian didn't look up from the screen, her attention fixed on the damning details of the financial reports. And the investigation into the Meridian contract? Complete. Marcus approved a 37% markup on services that Meridian Industries then kicked back through Sienna Drake's shell consulting business. He essentially stole $280,000 from the company, enriching himself and his mistress. We have emails, bank transfers, everything meticulously documented. Not the only irregularity either. No, Vivian said, a coldness settling in her voice. No. We found 6 similar schemes over the past 14 months. Total theft approaches $1. $2 million. He's been a very creative. Patricia paused, studying Vivian's face. You know, when you first asked me to dig into his activities, I thought you might be looking for revenge. But this is actual blatant fraud. Vivian finally looked up, her hazel eyes cool and assessing. I wasn't looking for revenge, Patricia. I was looking for the truth. Marcus always claimed his rapid success at Ashford Global was due to his innate brilliance and relentless work ethic. I wanted to know if that was true, or if he'd simply been cutting corners. He's been cutting corners and lining his pockets? Patricia confirmed, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. The question is, what do you want to do about it? Vivian set down her tablet and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the sprawling city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably celebrating with Sienna, toasting their impending engagement, convinced he'd traded up from his struggling artist wife to a powerful, glamorous future. He had absolutely no idea that Vivian Ashford Thornton was actually Vivian Ashford, sole heir to the Ashford global fortune. Her grandfather, Jonathan Ashford, had founded the company 50 years ago, building it from a small family business into a global powerhouse. When he died 8 years ago, control had passed to her grandmother, Elizabeth, who'd run the empire from the shadows, quietly pulling the strings while publicly maintaining that the company was managed by a board of directors. When Elizabeth passed away 2 years ago, everything had come to Vivian. The $8.7 billion company, the vast real estate portfolio, the sprawling investment funds, the priceless art collection worth hundreds of millions. Because Vivian's little paintings weren't merely amateur efforts. She was, in fact, a highly successful and sought-after artist, selling her works under a pseudonym for six-figure sums. That was how she'd met Marcus 12 years ago, at a gallery opening where he'd been trying to impress clients and she'd been modestly displaying her art. He'd never known who she really was. She'd been so tired of men who wanted her money, her name, her connections. Marcus had seemed different, middle-class, ambitious, but, most importantly, genuine. Someone who wanted her for herself, not for what she possessed. So, she'd hidden her wealth behind layers of lawyers and trusts. She'd posed as a struggling artist, scraping by on small commissions. She'd lived modestly in Marcus's house, meticulously contributing to the bills with money from her artistic endeavors, allowing him to believe that he was the successful one, the provider. And for 12 years, she genuinely loved him, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth, waiting until he was secure enough in himself and in their marriage to handle the revelation. But then came Sienna Drake, the affair that Marcus thought he'd hidden so well, the betrayal that had gutted Vivian more deeply than any financial loss ever could. "I gave him every chance," Vivian said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Even during the divorce proceedings, I offered him a fair settlement. I suggested marriage counseling. I tried to salvage what we had." She paused, her voice cracking slightly. "And he kicked me out of his house, my grandfather's house that I'd bought and put in his name like I was trash." "So, tomorrow," Patricia prompted gently. Vivian straightened her shoulders, a steely glint returning to her eyes. "Tomorrow, Marcus Thornton is going to propose to his mistress in front of 400 people. Including all of Ashford Global's executives and board members. And I'm going to introduce myself as the CEO he's never met." Vivian's reflection in the window looked nothing like the soft, gentle woman Marcus had divorced. This was a woman of immense power, a force to be reckoned with. "And then I'm going to give him a choice." "What kind of choice?" Patricia asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Vivian turned, and her smile was as sharp and brittle as broken glass. "The kind that reveals exactly who people really are." The charity gala. The Meridian Hotel's grand ballroom glittered like a meticulously crafted jewel box. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the polished marble floors, reflecting off the champagne flutes held aloft by the elegantly dressed attendees. Women in stunning designer gowns mingled with men in bespoke tuxedos, their voices a low hum punctuated by the delicate strains of Vivaldi played by a string quartet tucked away in a corner. Marcus Thornton felt like he was floating on a cloud of success and anticipation. This was his moment. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed for, was about to culminate in this one perfect night. In his pocket, nestled in a velvet box, the engagement ring, a flawless 3-carat diamond that had cost him a small fortune. $20,000, waited for the opportune moment. Sienna stood beside him, radiating confidence and allure in her vibrant red Valentino gown, a vision of sophisticated beauty that drew admiring stares from every man in the room. "Have you seen the CEO yet?" Sienna whispered, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I've been discreetly watching the entrance all evening. Nobody has arrived who looks like they own a multi-billion-dollar company." Marcus subtly scanned the room as well. He recognized most of the faces, VPs, directors, senior managers. The board members held court near the bar, a group of distinguished older men and women who rarely deigned to speak to anyone below the executive level. But no obvious CEO candidate. "Fashionably late, probably," Marcus said. attempting to project an air of nonchalance. It builds mystique, you know? Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia Holloway's voice rang out, amplified by the sound system as she took the small stage at the front of the ballroom. Thank you all for attending Ashford Global's annual charity gala. Before we begin the formal program, I have a very special announcement to make. The room quieted instantly, all conversations ceasing as the attendees turned their attention to the stage. Marcus felt a renewed surge of anticipation. This wasn't the scheduled time for his proposal, but perhaps. As many of you know, Ashford Global has been led for the past 15 years by a CEO who preferred to maintain their privacy and run the company through trusted representatives. Tonight, that changes. It is my distinct honor to introduce, for the first time in a public company capacity, the woman who has guided Ashford Global to its current $8.7 billion valuation, the granddaughter of our founder, the sole owner and CEO of Ashford Global Industries, Miss Vivian Ashford. The spotlight swung dramatically towards the ballroom's main entrance, illuminating the doorway, and Vivian walked in. But this wasn't the Vivian that Marcus knew. This woman was a completely transformed being, an entirely different creature. She wore a sleek, black evening gown that probably cost more than his car, a dress that clung to her figure in all the right places, accentuating her newfound confidence. A dazzling array of diamonds adorned her throat and ears, catching the light like captured stars. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy, practical bun, was now styled in an elegant updo that framed her face perfectly, highlighting her sharp cheekbones and piercing hazel eyes. She moved with a grace and assurance that radiated power, the unmistakable air of someone who owned not just the company, but the building, the city block, probably half the city. She looked like money, old money, serious money. She looked like raw, unadulterated power. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him clammy and lightheaded. No, this couldn't be happening. This wasn't possible. It had to be some kind of mistake. Some woman who merely happened to look eerily like his ex-wife. Some elaborate, cruel cosmic joke. But then Vivian's eyes found his across the crowded ballroom, and he knew. The unmistakable recognition in her gaze sent a jolt of icy dread through his veins. Sienna's hand clutched his arm, her grip surprisingly tight. "Marcus," she hissed, her voice laced with panic. "Marcus, that's your ex-wife. What the hell is going on?" I can't. Marcus stammered, unable to form coherent words. His brain simply couldn't process the reality of what he was seeing. Vivian took the stage beside Patricia, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. When she spoke, her voice carried the clear, unwavering authority of someone who'd spent her entire life in boardrooms, making million-dollar decisions before breakfast. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know many of you are surprised to see me. For those who don't know me personally, let me be clear. I am Vivian Ashford, daughter of Richard Ashford, granddaughter of Jonathan Ashford, our company's founder. I inherited controlling interest in Ashford Global 2 years ago and have been managing operations through our excellent executive team." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Marcus, sending another shiver down his spine. "But recent events have prompted me to take a more direct role. I believe in transparency, accountability, and ethical business practices, which is why I've spent the past 3 months conducting a comprehensive audit of all executive decisions and financial transactions." Marcus felt his knees weaken, threatening to buckle beneath him. Sienna's nails dug deeper into his arm, drawing blood. "Most of our executives have performed admirably," Vivian continued, her voice smooth and professional. "But, unfortunately, our investigation uncovered significant irregularities. Specifically, a disturbing pattern of fraud involving inflated vendor contracts and elaborate kickback schemes that siphoned approximately $1.2 million from company funds over the past 14 months. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd, louder this time, laced with shock and disbelief. The board members near the bar suddenly looked very attentive, their faces grim and impassive. "Mr. Marcus Thornton," Vivian said, her voice clear and resonant, and the spotlight swung once again, this time pinning him like an insect under a microscope. "Vice President of Operations, would you please join me on stage?" Marcus felt 400 pairs of eyes turn toward him, scrutinizing him, judging him. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He was frozen in place, paralyzed by a potent cocktail of fear and disbelief. "Marcus." Vivian's voice was softer now, almost gentle, but somehow even more terrifying. "Please, we need to have a conversation." Somehow, his legs, seemingly disconnected from his brain, carried him forward through the parting crowd, up the 3 short stairs to the stage, under the blinding spotlight that made him feel like he was burning from the inside out. Up close, Vivian looked even more different. Not just the expensive clothes and the impeccable styling, but something fundamental in her bearing. There was a newfound steel in her eyes, a resolute strength that he'd never seen before. This was the woman who'd been signing his paychecks for the past 5 years. The woman who'd watched him climb the corporate ladder, divorce her, and celebrate his freedom like he'd won the lottery. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the thumping of his heart. "Surprised." "Vivian, this is—" "Yes, Marcus. I'm the CEO of the company where you work, where you've worked for the past 5 years, ever since I discreetly arranged for your application to be fast-tracked through the system." She smiled, but the expression was devoid of warmth, a mere baring of teeth. "Did you really think your rapid promotions were all merit-based? That you were just so brilliant that you rose from a mid-level manager to VP in record time? You helped me?" Marcus felt reality itself shifting beneath his feet, the solid ground he thought he knew dissolving into quicksand. "I loved you, Marcus," Vivian said simply, her voice devoid of emotion. "I wanted you to succeed. I wanted you to feel proud of yourself before I told you the truth about who I am. But you were never satisfied, were you? Each promotion just made you hungrier, more arrogant, more willing to cut corners." She gestured to Patricia, who handed her a thick folder. Vivian opened it, displaying pages of financial records, emails, bank transfers, damning evidence of his illicit activities. The Meridian contract, the Westbrook deal, Carrington Industries, South Shore Logistics, 6 fraudulent schemes. "Marcus, you stole from my company while sleeping beside me every night. And then, when you decided to trade me in for a younger model, you threw me out like garbage and took everything I'd given you for granted." "I didn't know, Vivian," Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I didn't know it was your company. I swear I didn't know." "Would it have mattered?" Vivian's voice was sharp, cutting through his pathetic pleas. "If you'd known I owned Ashford Global, would you have treated me better? Would you have loved me more? Or would you have just been better at hiding your theft and your affair?" Marcus had no answer. He was trapped, cornered, exposed. In his peripheral vision, he could see Sienna in the crowd, her face ashen, already edging towards the exit, her dreams of becoming Mrs. Marcus Thornton evaporating before her very eyes. "I'm going to give you a choice, Marcus," Vivian said, her voice projecting clearly to the entire silent ballroom. "You can resign quietly right now, effective immediately, and I won't press criminal charges. You'll repay the $1, $2 million with interest over time through wage garnishment if necessary, but you'll avoid jail. You'll never work in this industry again, but you'll be free. Or," Marcus croaked, or you can fight me, claim you were entrapped, that I manipulated you, that this is all revenge for the divorce. You can lawyer up and try to destroy my reputation to save yours." Vivian's eyes were cold now, all warmth extinguished. "And I will bury you, Marcus. I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure you face the maximum criminal penalties. I will personally testify about every conversation where you bragged about cutting corners. And I will make certain that everyone in this industry knows exactly what kind of man you truly are." The ballroom was so quiet Marcus could hear his own ragged heartbeat pounding in his ears. He could feel the weight of 400 judging eyes boring into him. His entire future hung precariously in the balance. "What's it going to be, Marcus?" Vivian asked, her voice devoid of pity. Marcus looked out at the crowd, at the board members watching with impassive faces, at his fellow VPs, some smirking with schadenfreude, others looking away in awkward embarrassment, at Sienna, who'd finally made it to the exit and was now fleeing through the doors, abandoning him to his fate. The woman he'd thought he was trading up for, deserting him the moment things got difficult. He looked back at Vivian, at the woman he'd spent 12 years with, the woman he'd dismissed as unambitious, unsuccessful, beneath him, the woman who'd actually been supporting him every step of the way, loving him, believing in him, even as he betrayed her in the most egregious way possible. "I'll resign," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'll repay every dollar." I'm sorry." Vivian nodded once, crisp and businesslike. "Patricia will handle the paperwork. Security will escort you out." She paused, and for just a fleeting moment, something that might have been sadness flickered across her face. "For what it's worth, Marcus, I really did love you. I would have given you everything. All you had to do was love me back." "I did love you, Vivian," Marcus said, and realized with crushing certainty that it might even be true. I wanted more than what you were showing me." Vivian's laugh was hollow, devoid of amusement. "Then I guess you wanted something that doesn't exist." "Goodbye, Marcus." Security guards materialized at his elbows, their presence a stark and humiliating reminder of his complete and utter downfall. As they led him through the ballroom, past the staring faces and hushed conversations, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in one of the ornate mirrors. He looked small, diminished, insignificant, exactly how he'd once described Vivian. The irony wasn't lost on him. Epilogue. 6 months later, Marcus Thornton stood in line at the unemployment office, a world away from the opulent executive suite at Ashford Global. The fraud investigation had made headlines in all the major business publications. No reputable company would touch him now. He was working part-time at a local hardware store, his meager paycheck heavily garnished to repay his debt to Ashford Global. It would take him 20 years to clear the balance, if he was lucky. Sienna had dumped him via text message the night of the gala, a terse and brutally honest farewell. She'd blamed him for ruining her career, even though Vivian hadn't pressed charges against her. Within a month, Sienna had left the city entirely, chasing opportunities elsewhere, leaving Marcus to face the consequences of his actions alone. The house, the beautiful house that Marcus had thought was his, had been quietly repossessed. It turned out it had always been owned by an Ashford family trust, a fact he'd conveniently overlooked in his relentless pursuit of success. Marcus was now renting a cramped studio apartment in a rundown neighborhood he once would have sneered at. He'd lost everything. His career, his reputation, his home, his fiancée, all of it gone in one spectacular night of reckoning, because he'd been too blind to see what he had, too greedy to appreciate it, too arrogant to value the woman who'd actually loved him unconditionally. Sometimes, late at night, when the loneliness was almost unbearable, he Googled Vivian's name. She'd become a media darling, hailed as the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Business magazines praised her innovative leadership and her commitment to ethical practices. She'd increased Ashford Global's value by another $1 billion in just 6 months. There were photos of her at charity events, industry conferences, art gallery openings. In every picture, she looked confident, powerful, and genuinely happy. She'd moved on completely, leaving him in the dust. Marcus had foolishly thought he was trading up when he divorced Vivian for Sienna. He thought he was climbing to something better, something more glamorous and exciting. Instead, he'd thrown away a queen to chase a mirage, and now he was paying the ultimate price. And now, standing in line at the unemployment office, filling out forms that asked for his employment history, which now included the word resigned under circumstances he could never fully explain, Marcus finally understood the magnitude of what he'd lost. Not just the money, though $8 billion would have been nice. Not just the power, though being married to a CEO certainly had its perks. But the one person who'd loved him for himself, who'd seen potential in him, who'd believed in him enough to help him succeed, even while carefully concealing her true identity. He'd kicked her out into the rain, and she'd been the secret billionaire owner of his entire world. The irony was crushing, but not as crushing as the agonizing knowledge that he had no one to blame but himself. As for Vivian, she returned to her elegant penthouse that evening after another successful board meeting, poured herself a glass of chilled Sauvignon Blanc, and looked out at the twinkling city lights, the sparkling tapestry of human ambition spread out before her. She'd built Ashford Global's value by another $1 billion, exceeding all expectations. She'd cleaned house of corrupt executives, implementing strict new ethical guidelines and transparency measures that would prevent such abuses from happening again. She'd become a symbol of integrity and female empowerment in the cutthroat world of corporate finance. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the city lights seemed to fade and the silence of her opulent apartment closed in around her, she still felt the lingering ache of what she'd lost. Not Marcus, exactly. She'd stopped loving him the moment he'd heartlessly thrown her belongings into the rain, exposing his true character. But the shattered dream of what they could have been, if he'd just been the man she'd naively believed him to be. Still, she reminded herself, she'd survived. She'd rebuilt her life, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And she'd done it on her own terms without compromising who she was. That was worth more than any marriage built on lies and deceit. Vivian raised her glass to the city, to new beginnings, and to the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes, it's just living well, thriving in the face of adversity, and embracing the extraordinary life she'd been given. And she was living very well indeed.